Hey guys, tonight we slip out under a pale Saharan moon and into a hush so wide you can hear single grains of sand tap your sandals. The caravan sits like a sleepy constellation, shielded lamps, low voices, and camels exhaling steam that curls away into starlight. You stand at the edge, cheeks cool, palms dusty, already falling into the rhythm you're about to borrow. Long steps, short breaths, patient silence. Tiny reality check here. You probably won't survive this schedule with your modern thermostat and a single travel bottle, but that's why we're doing this gently, together, from your pillow. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing the map of night unfold in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You accept the lead rope, a braided fiber rough as fresh bread crust, and move when the handler moves, a quiet joining more than a march. Pre-dawn departures are the caravan's secret handshake. They buy cool hours and friendly dunes. A mainstream fact to tuck like a date in your pouch. Trans-Saharan caravans often set off in darkness to dodge the worst heat, letting dromedaries' broad, spongy feet ride a trail the wind is too lazy to erase before noon. The sand still holds night like a chilled ceramic bowl. The air is clean and near, smelling vaguely of dust and camel hair. Your first lesson in rest arrives immediately. You sleep when the sky is reasonable. Not heroic, not stubborn, reasonable. The guide at the head, a silhouette with a staff, favors that word. He taps once, the line settles. Lamps, little brass mouths licking oil, are hooded. Stars are better, he murmurs. You tilt your head and let Orion lay a ruler across the blackboard sky while the Pleiades scatter like a pinch of salt. Historians still argue whether caravans standardized pure night marching in every season or flexed the routine with seasons and winds, but the guiding math is simple. Walk while the air is kind, nap when light starts haggling. Your camel kneels, soft snort, sand deep sigh, and you climb into a wooden saddle polished by decades of travelers who also thought they were prepared. The gait becomes a lullaby you have to learn. Forward, down, glide, up. 4 beats that file the sharp edges off your thoughts. Light joke number 1. This saddle is a brutally honest yoga instructor. Slouch once and your spine reports you to management. Straighten, breathe, and suddenly the whole desert pretends it was rooting for you. Attention becomes water in a shallow bowl. Every step is a careful pour. The line lengthens and thins, a sentence written in hooves. Someone coughs, someone clicks a tongue, someone hums one experimental bar, and then decides the night is already singing enough. Another mainstream note slides in. These paths lace oases with markets, Taghaza's salt pits to Walata, Timbuktu, and Gao. Salt slabs shuffle south like pale bricks, while gold dust, leather, and cloth drift north. Ideas and songs stow away in both directions. Your nap plan rides along that same invisible current. The guide nudges the pace. The first nap window is negotiated like a treaty. Not yet. Not while the breeze still tugs at headscarves. You're taught to read air like a letter. If it pulls, you walk. If it strokes, you consider sleep. The rope between you and the next handler loosens with trust. Light joke number 2. Your smartwatch has officially become a bracelet. Very fashionable, 0 notifications. Out here, the operating system is sky-based. The clock faces a moving band of coolness. When the signal comes, a lamp shaded twice, a hand dropped once, you turn leeward and knead a little nest in the sand with a smoke-scented blanket. No tent. The sky is a ceiling that charges nothing and shows everything. Ground rules for desert napping arrive as whisper bullets. Keep low. Put your head uphill if the dune allows. Tuck shoes under the blanket fringe. Keep the water skin at your shoulder. Hitch the lead so your camel won't wander off to argue philosophy with a tamarisk. A quirky tidbit slips in with the quiet. Some travelers swipe a line of kohl along the eyelids, not just for beauty, they claim, but to tame glare when you wake. Whether it really sharpens contrast or simply feels right is one of those gentle desert debates you let the sand decide. You bite 2 dates, one sweet, one sweeter, and sip from a goatskin girba. The leather sweats a little and cools the water in return, a desert refrigerator powered only by patience. The caravan's sound lowers to a purr, fabric hush, sand soft footfalls, a shy clink of metal near the baggage train. Historians still argue whether those famous 1,000-camel convoys were literal or the boast of merchants with excellent imaginations. Either way, even a modest train behaves like a small town that learned how to walk. Sleep approaches cautiously, like a cat testing a stranger's lap. You invite it with ritual. Headscarf folded across your mouth so the wind can't write poems on your tongue. Hands tucked, heartbeat slow, thoughts arranged by size. Big ones filed to the rear, tiny questions queued at the front. You never quite let go. You set your mind to night watch, the mode where a tap of the guide's staff would lift you without drama. Light joke number 3. Congratulations. You're now a smartphone in battery saver mode. Still functional, notifications trimmed to the essentials, brightness politely dimmed. You don't count minutes. You measure how helpful the air feels. As the moon slides down, coolness investigates the edges of your blanket and decides to be on your side. A mainstream detail hums beneath the nap. At this steady pace, caravans average just a few kilometers per hour with breaks. Success is less about speed than durability and timing. You wake before the sky does anything theatrical. Dawn is a rumor first, a rinse of tin blue at the rim of the world, the kind of light that makes even footprints look thoughtful. Rising is ceremonial courtesy. You shake your blanket. No one likes sharing a nap with an ambitious beetle. Check sandals and retie the scarf. A fringe tidbit to pocket for later. Some travelers chew roasted date pits that smell faintly like coffee, claiming it lifts mood without spending water. Historians still argue whether that habit offered nutrition or simply busied the jaw, but routine can be its own gentle medicine. You take another sip, cool as a good handshake. The columns knit again without a shout. The handler lifts the rope. You answer by lifting your feet. The camel stands, front, then back, and your stomach does a slow elevator dip that somehow feels friendly. Shadows grow in reverse. The world shades in like a pencil sketch becoming certain. You feel the nap you banked doing its work, tidying thoughts, stacking patience, turning you from a person who wants sleep into a person who knows when it's coming next. This is the first quiet masterpiece of the caravan. You don't conquer the desert. You sink with it. Rest is scheduled by sky and sand, naps tucked between stars and lamps like commas in a long, careful sentence. You'll walk until palms create honest shade, instead of the kind you wish into existence. And when the breeze lowers its voice, you'll curl back into the leeward side of a dune and let the earth rock you again. Historians still argue whether scent-based wayfinding, sniffing for wet garden earth at night, ever played more than a romantic role in navigation, but you file the idea anyway, because out here even the wind is part of your planner. For now, you breathe with the camel. Forward, down, glide, up. The lamps behind you wink out one by one. The stars keep the appointment. Your nap ledger shows one small deposit, interest accruing in calm. Ahead, the guide's staff makes a neat dot in the sand, as if writing a message you'll read when it's time to rest again. And you move, and the desert moves with you, and the whole night seems pleased with how very quietly you're learning. You listen for the click of pace before you feel it, the soft chime that threads through hoof sand and breath like a string of sleepy stars. The led camel carries the clearest bell, a small copper voice with confidence. Farther back, quieter bells answer from ankles and neck straps, never loud enough to startle, just enough to keep the file stitched together in the dark. The sound organizes you. You don't watch a clock, you borrow one. 3 steps, a chime, 5 calm breaths, another chime. Your body starts filing the desert into measures the way a lullaby files a long night into something you can cross without drama. The handler beside you grins under his indigo cheche. Bells are for the night, he says, and for the new. New like you. You nod, still learning the grammar of rope and rhythm. Bells are reassurance. If the line kinks behind a dune's shoulder, if a shallow hollow hides the guide's lamp, the sound draws you back into unity. Mainstream fact, wrapped in usefulness. Dromedaries, the one-humped camels, carry loads at a steady 3 to 5 kilometers an hour across long stretches, so caravans favor endurance over speed. The desert rewards patience that can count, not bravado that burns out. The rope in your hand is more conversation than control. A halter line from the leader runs to a ring on your saddle, and your spare lead trails in a neat coil, ready to help if someone's knot sulks. You feel the slack speak. This is right. This is too tight. This is a camel with opinions. Light joke number 1. If you slouch, the camel files a complaint directly to your tailbone. If you sit steady and breathe slow, the complaint is replaced by a stamped approved. You adjust, soften your knees, and the sway becomes a cradle instead of a negotiation. The bells don't just keep you together, they decide when you're allowed to drift. When the rhythm gathers, sound stacking because the file compresses to climb a slope, you stay alert, lifting a touch in the stirrups to help the animal find its footing. When it lengthens on smooth ground, fewer chimes, more sand whisper, you let your shoulders loosen and allow a saddle doze, that half-sleep where your thoughts move like low clouds and your eyes rest comfortably behind the scarf. Historians still argue whether bells at the ankles were common across all Saharan routes or mostly local habits, with some merchants preferring silence to avoid broadcasting their position. Either way, your little orchestra hums a permission slip to relax. Because pace is the scaffolding for rest, the morning is counted in song lengths. A work chant blooms 2 camels back, low and warm, a line of syllables with a pocket for humor about stubborn baggage and legendary beasts that absolutely showed up last season. You just weren't there. Camel songs, Hoda-style calls, are the original lo-fi beats to plod to. They soothe the animals and tick the minutes without fuss. Quirky tidbit to pocket. Some caravans tie a small blue bead beside the leader's bell as a ward against the evil eye, swearing it keeps tempers cool and hooves certain. Whether you believe in the bead or simply enjoy the flash of color is between you and the sky. You study the feet because that's the level of calm you're working with now. 2 toes, big pads spreading like rising dough, nails like polite thumbnails. Weight rolls forward, as if the earth built a gentle conveyor just for you. The bell becomes a second soundtrack you compare the stride against. Bright ringing means firmer crust. A muffled jingle means softer slip. That matters for naps. Firm crust equals more bounce, less doze. Soft slip becomes the cradle you were hoping for. Exactly the terrain where a minute or two of saddle sleep arrives without asking. Another mainstream note clicks neatly into place. Many caravans carve the day into blocks. Pre-dawn travel, a shade break as the sun sharpens, late afternoon travel, and a night march, with the white-hot middle set aside for real sleep. Your internal ledger forms. Bells high and close, no nap. Bells thin and lazy. Catnap credits allowed. You tuck these credits like dates into your sash, to be spent when the guide's staff taps sand and the whole line sighs into stillness. Between chimes, the handler demonstrates the gear rituals that keep pace gentle. He rubs a smear of tallow along the girth where the strap kisses hair. Less chafe equals less fuss equals smoother bells. He balances the saddlebags, water left, salt right, because an uneven load makes the camel's hips throw a tiny tantrum that shakes you awake. He checks the bell's thong so the clapper swings free but not wild. Light joke number 2. You have officially become luggage with opinions. Your job is to be the chill carry-on everyone envies. Wind sweeps across the line from left to right, the bells turning briefly shy, and the guide raises his palm. Ease. You practice a wrist trick for micro-rest. Loop the lead once and let the rope's weight remind your fingers to relax. When the tension jumps, you're awake without drama. The loop becomes a silent bell of its own, a haptic notification from an older century. Somewhere in your near future, a kettle already smells like it wishes it were boiling. You file that promise under reasons to be calm. A debate drifts up like heat off dark stone. Historians still argue whether bells were tuned intentionally. Some oral histories remember families selecting favorite pitches at market stalls, while others say a bell's voice is simply the happy accident of a village smith hammering scrap between door hinges and a rolled goatskin. Tonight, your leader's bell rings a small, cheerful G when the wind is friendly, and something closer to try again when it swings into the breeze. You hum a soft harmony, and the camel under you pretends not to be flattered. You make friends with the idea of moving naps. The line crests a gentle saddle. For 30 perfect seconds, the bells nearly vanish. It feels like walking on the back of a sleeping world. That's your cue. You soften your gaze, rest your tongue against your palate, and let attention widen until it catches on nothing. A blink becomes a breath. A breath becomes a sip of rest. When the bell returns, a shy jingle from ahead, you surface without gasping, as if your name had been called kindly rather than shouted across a schoolyard. Quirky sidetrack, because the desert loves them. One handler shows you a palm-sized pouch stitched from camel leather and scented with crushed thyme. He presses it to his nose when the wind turns stuffy, swearing it teaches the lungs manners. Maybe the herb opens the breath. Maybe it's the ritual. Historians still argue whether such pouches were medicine or talisman, but you tuck the idea next to the coal line and the date pit coffee from earlier. Tools for tiny comforts accumulate the way stars do. Quiet, useful, there when you look. The pace increases as the eastern sky chalks itself wider. The bells space out, more distance between chimes, and your breathing widens with them. You ride the resonance like a metered poem. 2 lines of sound, 1 line of silence. Repeat. The handler taps his cheekbone to remind you where to snug the scarf against glare when the sun climbs. He mimes lowering the cloth for a sip from the girba and raising it again without breaking rhythm. Light joke number 3. Your smartwatch has given up and labeled this activity elliptical-ish camel, and honestly, that's generous. Another mainstream fact sits quietly under the music. Caravans often appoint a pace setter, sometimes a veteran handler, sometimes simply the calmest camel. And that decision matters more than any map in the first hour of light. Your pace setter is a dun-colored drama avoider with eyelashes like paintbrushes and an expression that says you are acceptable cargo. Its bell is modest, its tread exact, and you find your heartbeat matching its step without effort. You sip from the goatskin, water cool again thanks to the morning breeze, and tuck it at your hip where your hand can find it without hunting. The guide's staff begins its neat dot in the sand, a punctuation you now understand. Not yet, now, rest soon. You listen harder than you look. You count breaths to the next chime and exhale into the pause after it. And suddenly the desert, which seemed lawless on maps, offers you a compact law. Time, wrung softly from a camel's throat. The bells carry you into dawn with the confidence of routine. They are small sounds with large consequences. Keep the line. Set the heart. Grant the right to doze without falling apart. As the sun lifts a pale coin above the rim of dunes, you realize you haven't asked the hour once. You know what the bells know. This is the sliver between effort and ease, a moment in which a thoughtful traveler can borrow a little more rest before the world sharpens. So you breathe with the metronome, give the rope a friendly squeeze, and let the camel write another slow sentence across the sand while your eyelids negotiate one more calm, careful blink. You learn to tell time by trees before the sun even clears its throat. A palm belt on the horizon means water, not just the wet itself, but the human promise around it. A ring of brick or stone at the wellhead, a chain of buckets, a lip of shade, and a brief amnesty from the rule that everything here takes effort. Your nap plan becomes botanical. You count the palms like beads. Clusters mean a longer pause. A thin string of silhouettes means a sip and go. The bells behind you soften as the line loosens, and the guide's staff draws smaller punctuation marks in the sand, comma, 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 then the period of a stop. An oasis is not a puddle. It's a machine built for mercy. Mainstream fact. Many Saharan oases run on underground galleries, foggaras, cousins of the Persian qanat, that tap a sloping aquifer and deliver water in quiet channels to gardens. 3 layers of life stack in the shade. Dates high, fruit in the middle, and vegetables and herbs near the soil. You slip from stark light into that layered cool and feel your shoulders remember they have settings besides tents. The first order of business is always water for animals, then people, then the naps you've been saving like coins. A boy lifts a goatskin and pours arcs of shine into a trough. The camels make grateful houseplant noises. You park your saddle under a net of shade where palm fronds write soft, moving stripes on the ground. The handler gestures to the leeward side of a low wall, out of the wind's way, out of the sun's direct commentary. Rope coiled, girba propped, scarf loosened 1 polite notch. You rehearse the drill you'll repeat all across the desert. A quirky tidbit to add to your growing comfort kit. If someone wets a cloth and wraps the girba in it, then sets it in the faintest breeze, the evaporative magic cools the water enough to make the next sip feel like a good joke told quietly. Tiny refrigerators powered by patience and air. You map naps to palms with a confidence that would make a watch jealous. Long sleep waits for a full crown of trees and a pond with dragonfly handwriting on it. Short sleep, those 10 to 15-minute sand surrenders, belongs to wells that barely wear a halo of green. The guide mutters a phrase he's used since before dawn. Water point, nap point. He taps the ground with the staff where the shade will be in an hour, because the sun travels and you should not. You look at a single palm's shadow and read its length like a gentle sundial. 2 body lengths now, 3 soon, 1 nap if you skim, 2 if you settle. Light joke number 1. Congratulations. You just measured time in nap lengths, the only unit your brain respects before breakfast. Historians still argue whether oasis groves along certain routes were planted expressly as beacons for caravans, or simply grew dense where ownership and irrigation worked out. Either way, you treat them like station clocks, each with its own mood and schedule. Some oases are organized like polite libraries, numbered plots, a tidy foggara intake, ledgers for maintenance dues, and a man with ink on his fingers who smiles exactly once. Others are looser, a gossip of palms, laughter, a well that squeaks when the leather bucket skims the water. That squeak becomes your new alarm, sleeper's delight, because buckets mean filling, and filling means you have time to curl up on your blanket, set the scarf like a gentle cloud across your eyes, and drift. Mainstream note to fold under your nap. Across Arabic travel accounts, a day's stage, the marhala, often anchors distances. Routes between oases are planned in these stages, not in kilometers, because the practical measure is how far you can go before you must drink, feed, and shade. So you plan like they plan. 2/3 of a marhala until the small palms, then a longer sleep at the gardens where the well has the stone lip. Your ledger of sleep and water syncs neatly, the way 2 wheels click when gears are clean. You wake to small things. A kettle starting to think about boiling. A date dropping into a basket with the soft punctuation of ripe fruit. The camel you now consider a colleague blowing a contented sigh. The handler passes around a bowl of slightly sour elben, fermented milk, that wipes the edges off thirst in a way plain water never manages. You sip, and your mouth remembers how to be pleased. Light joke number 2. It turns out your ideal cafe is a palm grove with no menu, and excellent service for customers who show up with hooves. The oasis teaches you the difference between sleeping and hiding. In the open dunes, you nap like a fox, angled to wind and sound. In the grove, you can afford a deeper tilt. On your side, knees loose, a hand under your cheek so your ear stays off sand that still warms from yesterday. You tuck the girba against your back as a friendly, cool stone. The bells fade to a small thought. Birds audition for each other, and leaves clack like lazy cards being shuffled. Historians still argue whether caravan leaders standardized nap rotations, first watch, second watch, third, at oases, or whether small groups improvised. Your train handles it with agreeable ritual. 2 people mind animals, 1 minds water, others mind nothing but rest. You wander the edge of the gardens as you stretch, counting the ingenious details that keep this place alive. Channels lined with stone. Narrow sluice gates that turn a trickle into a conversation with gravity. A shallow pond scalloped with footprints. You run a finger along a foggara outlet and feel the steady cool. Another mainstream fact sits right there in the brickwork. Maintenance is community law. Families take turns cleaning the galleries, and caravans sometimes pay a fee or bring gifts, salt slabs, cloth, stories to be welcome. You listen to two elders debate a matter of real importance, whose dates make the better paste for travel cakes. You decide it's a tie, because your nap just was. A fringe practice appears like a charm from someone's pocket. A tiny scrap of indigo cloth tied to a young palm near the well. The handler explains in a voice that gives superstition the respect of custom. It's for safe passage and untroubled water. Perhaps it does nothing but look lovely. Perhaps it does exactly what it promises because hands believed while tying the knot. Historians still argue whether talismans at wells were widespread or mostly attached to certain tribes and seasons, but your schedule, your thirst, and your sleep thank any scrap of kindness the desert offers. Before stepping back into the afternoon glare, you check the geometry of shade the way a sailor checks wind. The sun has advanced. Your patch of mercy has thinned to a ribbon laid neatly along the wall. That's the signal. You cinch the girth. Tallow smoothed earlier doing its golden job. Balance the bags, and test the bell thong with a thumb so its voice is a calm chime instead of a scold. The guide marks the next water point in the most practical of units. 2 songs and a break, then the low palms. You nod because your body now believes songs more than numbers. Light joke number 3 rides out with you. If modern life offered oasis hours at work, mandatory shade, hydration, and quiet, you suspect productivity would spike so hard it would need its own camel. You swing up. The camel rises like a gentle elevator again, and the world resets to its measured sway. Your eyelids negotiate another small treaty. Watch the drift of heat, but not so hard you forget to breathe. And your mind goes back to its battery-saver cadence, ready to collect 10-minute rest credits whenever bells and sand give permission. The palms shrink behind you to a line of punctuation marks at the bottom of the sky. Their green looks even greener from a distance, a soft stripe that says, "Yes, you can." Another oasis waits ahead, a different clock with a different mood, and until then you carry its shadow with you, a pocket of cool stored in your memory like a favorite paragraph. The bells stretch to their travel distance. The rope hums its little safety note in your palm. The marhala shrugs its shoulder and becomes a thing you can cross. And so you do, with the quiet, repeating certainty of someone who knows that the next time you see palms, the world will offer water, shade, and the soft permission to sleep. You start timing your day with shadows and prayers the way sailors time by tides, letting faith and geometry share a single quiet wrist. Your smartwatch is still very pretty, bracelet of the year, but the desert's clock face is the ground at your feet. The guide plants a slim stick in the sand, a neat gnomon no taller than your forearm. Its shadow crawls like a shy cat. When the shade is shortest and almost hides under the stick, noon has brushed past. Dur. Arriving with permission to drop loads, pour water, rinse hands, and unroll a strip of shade the way a shopkeeper rolls out a rug. Mainstream fact, right on the sand. In Islamic practice, noon prayer begins after the sun passes its zenith, when shadow length starts increasing. Later, Asr begins when a standing object's shadow reaches its own length according to many jurists, and, in the Hanafi school, when it reaches twice that length. That's not just theology to you now, that's nap math, and nap math rules. You angle the animals so their bodies throw a friendly triangle over your blanket. Someone calls the adhan softly. No minaret here, just a human voice rising like a thread of silver. God is greater. Peace comes down as if it had been waiting in the sky with its shoes off. You rinse for wudu with the smallest courtesies: right hand, left hand, mouth, nose, face, arms, hair, ears, feet. Each gesture a cool punctuation mark. Water is precious, so you pour from a wooden ladle no larger than a cupped palm. The ladle is the custodian of moderation. Light joke number 1. At home, you need 3 apps to mind your habits. Here a spoon with good manners does the job. Not every day grants running water at exactly the right moment. The rule book has mercy stitched into it. If the girbas are low or the well is closed to rest the vein, you brush clean sand over your hands and forearms for tayammum, the traveler's ablution. Prayer ready with dust and intention. A quirky tidbit emerges from a pouch. A twig of miswak, the desert toothbrush carved from Salvadora persica, faintly peppery and sweet. You chew the end into bristles and polish your teeth under the palm shade, the world's quietest dental plan. The miswak becomes part of your drowsy ritual. Clean mouth, cooler head, better nap. The prayer mat lies on the leeward side of a low dune lip. Direction matters. You sight the Qibla by night with the arc of the stars, but by day you let a trick do geometry on your behalf. Plant the stick. At the moment of shortest noon shadow, that tiny line points due north-south, and with a little practice, the rest aligns. Historians still argue whether caravans commonly carried brass Qibla finders or astrolabe-like aids, or whether the working method was almost always this simple choreography of stick, sun, and experience. Either way, today the ground itself is your instrument, and the reading is clear enough to satisfy both conscience and compass. The prayer rhythms stitch naps into place. Dur invites a long siesta under deeper shade, the kind of sleep that feels like being folded into a friendly pocket, because the sun is on its loudest setting, and nobody competes with it. Later, between Dur and Asr, you slide into those cautious micro-rests, the saddle nods you've been cultivating since the first bells. Asr will come when shadows tell you it's time to gather and stretch again. Mainstream detail that now explains your actual schedule. Travelers are permitted to shorten, qasr, and combine, jam prayers, dur with asr, maghrib with isha. So leaders often choreograph marches and halts around those paired windows, gluing rest and devotion into one soft block of time. It turns out your itinerary has a gentle rhyme scheme. You watch the ground like a polite astronomer. The stick's shadow lengthens, first as long as your forearm, then as long as itself. Someone marks its tip with a pebble every 20 breaths, a breadcrumb trail you can read with half-lidded eyes. When the shadow hits equal, the handler lifts his chin. Asr's opening has strolled into camp. Depending on who taught whom, some caravans wait to twice for added certainty or community alignment. You've learned to read the faces as well as the sand. Historians still argue whether West African Maliki custom leaned toward the earlier threshold consistently on the routes you travel or varied with season and habit. But out here, scholarly footnotes resolve into a practical chorus. When the community moves, you move. You kneel, forehead to the mat, the heat a gentle press rather than a scold, and feel how the body resets. Thoughts that were quarreling fall into single file. When you rise, you feel as if someone quietly closed a dozen background tabs in your head. Light joke number 2. The original Do Not Disturb mode came standard. No monthly subscription, just a direction and a patch of sky. After Asr, the light leans golden, and shadows act like old friends who walk you home at an easy pace. You pack with the calm of someone who knows the next appointment. Maghrib, at the sun's level crossing, the moment between gold and blue when the bells hush without being told. Tonight you'll likely combine later, Maghrib and Isha, when the breeze cools the spine of the night and the stars come back to supervise. That pairing is a gift to travelers. Less stop and start, more long breath. You adopt a few travelers' hacks that feel older than the roots. You pin a tiny knot into the hem of your scarf for each prayer completed on the move. At the next big stop, you unpick and smile at the tidy row of effort. You use your thumb as a sundial. Held at arm's length, each thumb width above the horizon is roughly 15 minutes. And while no astronomer would publish that, your camel appreciates the optimism. You teach your body a soft countdown. 3 palm widths to Maghrib, 2 to stovelight, 1 to that caramel hour when the kettle starts whispering. The desert approves of anyone who can make time gentler. Then the hush you've been waiting for arrives without fanfare. The sun goes down as if drawing a curtain with 2 fingers. The call lifts again, an ember in the air, and the caravan becomes a small neighborhood that minds one another kindly. Mainstream fact, audible in the quiet etiquette. Any adult may call the adhan. Leadership rotates. What matters is clarity, intention, and the community answering. You face the direction you've been tracking all day, the ground still warm under your toes, and while the world adjusts its colors, you feel the nap you're about to take spool itself like soft rope in your chest. Debate drifts with the fragrant steam of tea. Historians still argue whether the strict 5-fold timetable ever bent more than we assume for long-haul trade or whether journals underreport that flexibility. Your guides shrug the way practical people shrug. The law makes space for mercy. The road honors the law with gratitude. You rest where principle and prudence meet, which happens to be a very comfortable address. You lie back after the evening prayers, scarf loosened to friend gathering instead of sun armor, and let the ground cool your pulse. A crescent moon tucks itself just above the dark line of palms. The first stars arrive like punctual guests. You feel yourself slide into the most useful sleep of the day, the one that bridges the hot afternoon and the gentle night march. Light joke number 3. Somewhere in an air-conditioned office a meeting could have been an asr, and productivity would have found religion. By the time Aisha settles, you are already in that half-made dream where bells ring from very far away, and also from inside your own chest. The schedule you keep now is not something you check, it's something you inhabit. Shadow lengths, prayer windows, water ladles, miswak, a thread of the voice in evening air. Their coordination becomes your watch. And when the guide taps the sand, and the bells gather into a single calm sentence again, you rise easily, rested by design rather than by luck, as if the whole day had been engineered solely to let you sleep exactly when you needed to. Night lays out its soft runway and invites you to read it. The first guide points with 2 fingers. Never the whole hand, superstition says you don't prod stars, and sketches a path you can hear as much as see. Orion floats to your left, a neat belt you could hang a scarf on. Follow that belt down and you meet Sirius, a bright drop of chilly sugar, the kind of star even sleep-heavy eyes obey. Above your right shoulder the Pleiades, the small glittering handful the Arabs call al-Thuraya, cluster like someone spilled salt with perfect manners. You're told, lightly and without sermon, that these 3 friends are your marching windows tonight. Orion to set the course, Sirius to fix the next leg, and the Pleiades to pace how long you can drift before dawn reminds bones about cold. You don't stare. You taste the sky in sips as if it were hot tea. The Milky Way smears a pale road overhead, Darb al-Laban, the road of the milkman, and you let that name make your breath slower. Mainstream fact to pin gently like a brooch. Saharan travelers really do use star families as seasonal and directional cues: Suhail, Canopus, low in the south for bearings, Polaris to the north when it's high enough to clear haze, and the heliacal rising and setting of the Pleiades as farm and travel markers along the Sahel. The guide's palm moves. "Hold a fist at arm's length for 10 degrees, he whispers, a thumb for 2. Your hand becomes a small astrolabe that refuses to wake your smartwatch. The bells help you count interval and intention. On the Orion leg, you're allowed saddle dozing. Eyes half-lidded, rope looped once around your wrist. On the Sirius reach, you stay more alert because the ground firms and the pace sharpens. Under the Pleiades, you bank a longer micro-nap, a careful exhale into the dark where the sand becomes the lullaby it keeps bragging it is. Light joke number 1. Congratulations. You now schedule sleep with a celebrity endorsement. Sirius has better name recognition than most apps. Dawn Cold is an honest accountant, and you plan around it. The air at this hour steals heat like a friend who borrows sweaters forever. So the wise thing is to nap before that last blue stretch when you'd shiver yourself awake. You loosen the scarf only slightly, slide a hand under your opposite elbow for warmth, and let the camel's slow furnace drift through your calves. This is where the night march earns its quiet paycheck. A 20-minute leeward curl stolen when the line stretches smooth, then back to the rhythm before stiffness writes its opinion letter to your knees. A quirky tidbit surfaces with a grin. One handler swears by a pinch of crushed fennel mixed into date paste as a star snack. He says it clears the head without making the throat greedy for water. You try a pea-sized ball, licorice and caramel making peaceful arrangements on your tongue, and while science can file its paperwork later, your eyelids admit this is agreeable. Historians still argue whether such herb-date combos were widespread caravan practice or just family tricks that survived because they tasted like permission. But the fennel earns a spot in your pocket pouch, alongside the miswak twig and the blue bead's memory. The guide marks time with the sky the way you marked time with shadows earlier. When Orion tips there, he says, we aim for the low saddle. When Sirius steps above that dune's shoulder, we drink. You confirm with your fist and thumb, learning to convert star height into minutes of pace. Mainstream note you can feel in your hips. Caravans prefer night segments not only for temperature, but for the docile air. Winds calm, mirage gone, silhouettes clear. So a steady 2 to 3 hours can pass under a dark ceiling without the drama daylight craves. Arguments hum softly under the singing sand. Historians still argue whether formal star calendars, the kind packaged in mnemonic poems with fixed dates, guided most Saharan routes, or whether guides improvised from a looser cloud of lore, adjusting to dust, season, and the temperament of camels that, let's be fair, have opinions. Your teacher favors a middle path. Fixed anchors like Suhail and Polaris when visible, flexible rests chosen by wind and the bell cadence. The desert is a syllabus with electives. You watch for false friends. Heat doesn't lie at night, but distance does, and stars can seduce a newbie into thinking almost there means arrived. The cure is humility. You measure, then you measure again, then you check with bells and breath. On some nights, haze wraps the horizon in gauze, so Sirius shrugs and disappears. On others, the Pleiades sparkle like gossip and invite daydreams you can't afford. That's why the second bell in the line, the one with the soft copper voice, is your co-pilot. Its spacing tells you whether your doze window is genuine or just enthusiasm. You adopt a few quiet star tricks that feel like you were meant to remember them. You align the belt of Orion east-west to keep the file honest when dunes mimic dunes. You follow the pointer line from Orion's belt down to Sirius when the path bends, and confirm you didn't invent the bend. When the Milky Way tilts toward the southern horizon at a certain angle, you know you've entered the portion of the march the guides nickname the White Road, where sand compacts into forgiving firmness and naps on the saddle become easier to stack. Light joke number 2. If constellations offered airline miles, you'd be elite status by the next oasis. The night smells different by star leg. Under Orion, the air is neutral and chalky. Under Sirius, colder and cleaner, as if the sky opened a window. Beneath the Pleiades, a faint sweetness drifts from somewhere ahead. Maybe tamarisk, maybe the idea of tamarisk, which is almost as useful. You practice open focus, that dreamy awareness where you notice the scent without clutching it. Hear the bell without chasing it. Keep the rope without squeezing it to confession. It turns out this is also how you sleep on purpose while moving. When the guide lifts 2 fingers and circles them once, you enter the nap pocket everyone loves. A shallow swale, wind leeward, bells stretched thin as silk, stars high enough to supervise, cold not yet bossy. You slide down, rug over knees, cheek in the old familiar hollow. Someone murmurs a line of prayer that sounds like thanks for rest. Someone else pretends not to hum a lullaby they learned as a child. Mainstream reality check from the ground. The coldest minutes often land just before dawn. Radiative cooling working like a quiet thief. So catching this pocket early is not laziness. It's logistics. You wake to a sound you already understand as kindness. A girba being tipped near your shoulder. A drop or 2 given to palms before they reach your mouth, because touching coolness wakes you more gently than swallowing it. The sky has deepened from velvet to something with a hint of slate. The Pleiades hover a little lower, still glittering, still bossing your schedule. Light joke number 3. A star cluster is now your project manager. It sets deadlines you actually meet. For a moment, the whole caravan moves like one long creature trained by the night. You mount in the dark with the competence that surprises you each time. The camel rises, the rope hums, the bell breathes. You check your thumb to horizon measure. 2 thumbs to dawn, maybe 3. You decide on one last tiny doze, a blink-length drift between bell and breath, the micro-rest that makes the difference between grumpy and gracious when tea announces itself later. The march resolves itself when Orion's belt tilts and points you toward the faintest gray on the far lip of the world. Stars soften, reducing their voices to kindly whispers, and you collect them into memory the way you did shade at the last oasis. You find you can name them now without disturbing their spell. Suhail when it shows, Polaris when haze behaves, Sirius the bright, Altherea the clustered. You realize your naps have become tidally allied with them. Permission from a belt, a bright, a handful, and that this alliance makes the desert less like an opponent and more like a very particular tutor. When the first cool wind of almost dawn brushes your scarf, you are already rearranging your ledger. Rest taken, rest owed, water sipped, water promised, prayers placed where stars allowed. The bells gather into their daybreak cadence. The guide's staff writes its dot punctuation again. You breathe with the camel. Forward, down, glide, up, and the night, having kept its side of the bargain, folds itself away, leaving you with a pocket of sleep you caught on purpose because you learned to read the sky like a slow, generous book. By late morning, the sun speaks in capital letters, and you answer with geometry and manners. Wind first, always wind. You hold a pinch of sand at shoulder height and let it fall. If the grains blow left to right, you angle the camp so the leeward side hugs you. If they drop straight down, you build your own breeze by sighting the rest circle on a small rise where air decides to be helpful. You've learned that a siesta isn't a retreat, it's engineering. The desert gives you a tool: wind, slope, shade, and you arrange them until sleep can stroll in without knocking. Harmattan days have their own etiquette. Mainstream fact to tuck under your headscarf. The harmattan is a dry northeasterly that sweeps off the Sahara toward the Atlantic and the Sahel, most noticeable between about November and March, carrying fine dust that turns the sky to pale pewter and drops humidity to paper crisp. On those mornings the light feels filtered, like the world chose a soft focus lens just for you. That's your signal to front-load walking in the coolest slice, then take a longer midday lie-down. Dust steals moisture faster than heat does, so you rest deeper to stay even. Light joke number 1. The harmattan is basically nature's air fryer. Everything gets drier, and somehow you still want a snack. You and the handlers build a quick shade that thinks like a sail. Saddles make the spine, tent poles the ribs, woven mats and a goat hair panel the skin. The trick is tilt. You angle the roof so hot air can escape and the breeze can tutor your nap. Goat hair is a quiet genius. Woven panels breathe when dry and tighten if a rare shower darkens the world. A fabric that understands seasons better than most calendars. You weight the windward edge with salt slabs or water bags so the shade doesn't decide to visit the next dune without you. Inside, the temperature drops a surprising handspan. Outside, the sun continues its monologue to an audience of rocks. Before you lie down, you do the sand test your bones now trust. Palm down, count to 7. If the sand feels like a pan you don't want to fry an omelet on, good. If it's halfway to omelet territory, move. Sleep is picky, but not fragile. You loosen the scarf from star armor to nap hammock. Fold it so dust has to file a proper petition to get into your nose, and tuck the edge beneath your cheek. On harmattan days, you dampen a corner of cloth with 2 fingers of water and lay it across your mouth. The evaporative coolness is tiny but sincere. Quirky tidbit, newly beloved. A curl of acacia resin smoldered in a little brazier at the edge of shade. Keeps flies negotiating in the lobby instead of the bedroom. It smells faintly like honey and old books. Nap perfume for people who know how to prioritize. Lunch becomes a lesson in permission. You pour a thin, salty millet porridge, Sahel-style comfort food, over a date paste that remembers the grove you left earlier. Salt replaces what the breeze politely borrowed. Sweetness persuades your brain that life is excellent. Someone grins and passes a pea-sized pinch of crushed fennel folded into the paste, your star snack graduating to siesta snack. You chew until your jaw remembers being soft. The kettle sighs 3 times, then laughs into a boil, and a pinch of tea leaves becomes glass dark in seconds. Mint arrives, and the steam smells like common sense. Light joke number 2. Congratulations. You've discovered the original productivity hack. 2 sips of tea, then a 90-minute nap you're legally required to brag about to no one. Historians still argue whether caravans across all routes formalized midday siestas as a fixed block, or whether leaders flexed them with season, animal condition, and market deadlines. Your train favors a practical creed. Noon is when shade is most valuable. Value is when we stop. On days when the harmattan growls, the siesta stretches to the edges of Dur and Asr, with prayers combined later. On clear days with a cool companion wind, the halt shortens, and you bank sleep at evening instead. The debate can stay in the books. The Sand's opinion, consulted by the back of your hand and the behavior of camels, wins every time. Inside the shade, you arrange yourself with athletic laziness. On your side, knees slack, one forearm under your cheek so your ear isn't pressed hard to the warmed ground. Girba propped in the shadiest corner. Plug snug so it doesn't exhale while you do. The rope, your night-long conversation partner, now lies in a loose question mark where your fingers can answer without fully waking. You treat the camp like a wind instrument. Narrow the upwind opening to speed the breeze. Widen the downwind exit so air doesn't sulk. A handler lifts a mat's corner 2 fingers' breadth, and suddenly the tent breathes like a big cat asleep. You close your eyes and catalog the cool. Shade on eyelids. Fabric tick. Dust hush. The patient jaw work of camels. Another mainstream note lays down its cushion. Many Trans-Saharan caravans scheduled the hottest hours for true sleep, not just rest, because human bodies, water supplies, and animals all spent less under shade. Travel diaries from Maghrebi traders and Sahelian scholars alike praise the long noon peace as the reason the night march could be so effortlessly patient. When you wake mid-sleep to turn, a handler is dusting the bell clappers with a thumb so they won't chatter at the slightest draft. Blessed silence as a service. You inherit a handful of little desert insurances. You tuck sandals under the mat edge to keep them cool and to prevent scorpions from checking the fit. Though in honesty, you've met more gossiping beetles than drama queens with tails. You set a small wind fence of sacks on the hot side of the shade, so the breeze loses its temper on burlap instead of your nap. You place a tiny wedge of wood under the water bowl, so it leans exactly enough to present the smallest evaporating surface while still easy to sip. Mathematics with a flavor of kindness. Dust moods get their own vocabulary defined by your nose. On some days the harmattan is a smudge, good for quiet light and long naps. On others it is talc delighted with its job, and you deploy your cheche as a filter. Double wrap across mouth and nose, copper taste on the first breath, then clean. You wet your index knuckles and hold them in front of your lips. If the skin dries in less than a slow 10 count, you drink now, not later. You discover that naps under those conditions are short and stacked. 20 minutes, check water. 20 more. Because thirst is a critic and you like good reviews. You're careful with fire. Cooking naps are the enemy of sleeping naps. On real scorchers, the cook sets the brazier in the wind, so smoke runs away like a disciplined child. Tea is brewed in 2 sprints. Anything that needs more heat waits for late afternoon. The smell of mint anchors your dreams without waking you fully, an olfactory bookmark saving your place in the long, slow book of road. Light joke number 3. Somewhere your smartwatch tries to label this period high-intensity interval training, and you let it, because who are you to crush such optimism? A small, beloved argument rolls through camp as softly as the breeze. Historians still argue whether Tuareg indigo veils, the Taghaza, offer extra UV protection beyond their shade, or whether the famous blue that kisses the skin just looks like protection because it announces experience. Either way, you adopt the habit of lowering the cloth so the indigo shadows your cheeks when you wake and step out to stretch. Your face feels cooler. Your eyes thank tradition. And if your cheekbones wear a faint dusk blue halo, you decide it looks like you graduated from a sensible school. Waking from the deep part of the siesta feels like surfacing in a pool that applauds quietly. You take a small sip and hold it a beat on your tongue before swallowing. Your mouth sends a thank you note. You run the miswak over your teeth, peppery, sweet, reset, and your jaw unlocks. Outside the shade, the sand has stopped hissing and started purring, a minor key that says the worst has passed. You roll the mats, fold the goat hair panel, praise the panel for understanding heat better than you do, and load the saddles while your shadow grows dignified again. When you climb up, the leather is warm, but not unkind. The camel stands. Your gut does its gentle elevator hello, and the first bell after siesta sounds almost like approval. Your nap ledger shows a healthy balance. Your water math aligns. The harmattan keeps its distance like a neighbor who waved enough already. You angle the line to borrow the late afternoon breeze, and everything, rope, bell, breath, drops back into the cadence you learned beneath the stars. The geometry you built lingers behind you, a little signature in the sand that the wind will erase, as it erases everything except the way those shapes taught your body the difference between surviving the heat and sleeping through it on purpose. Your water skin becomes a clock you can drink. You cradle the girba, goat skin dark as toasted bread, seams waxed and stitched, and feel the cool it sweats back to you. Every damp breath on its surface is a minute falling out of the hourglass, and you learn to hear time in the small slosh. The strap has knots you tied at dawn, 1 knot per promised sip, 1 knot per planned nap. You don't bargain with thirst. You schedule it. 2 knots before the saddle doze, you tell yourself. 1 knot after, tea later if the wind behaves. It is domestic and precise, the desert version of setting timers in a quiet kitchen. Mainstream fact to anchor the math. Dromedaries can rehydrate at astonishing speed, well over 50 liters in a single drink, sometimes close to 100, and go days between waterings depending on temperature and work, which is why the caravan's rhythm prizes long, careful stages tied to wells rather than sprinting for speed. Your own tank is much less talented, so you learn the human arithmetic. Mouthfuls per hour, not liters per legend. You standardize a mouthful, 2 seconds of pour with the girba held just above your lower lip, and translate that into walking units. 1 mouthful per 3 songs, 1 more if the harmattan turns fussy. Light joke number 1. Congratulations. You've replaced calorie counting with sip counting. Same anxiety, better taste. You watch for false saves, those greed-flavored gulps that buy 5 bright minutes and sell you thirst for an hour. The handler suggests a ritual that works better than discipline. Touch your brows, touch your tongue, touch your throat, then drink. The pauses make the water feel like a guest you invited rather than a thief who broke in. Quirky tidbit tucked in with a grin. Some travelers drop a single roasted date pit into the girba to soften that honest goat note, like a tiny filter that also smells faintly of caramel. Does it work chemically? Maybe a little. Does your nose agree? Entirely. You divide the day into cool segments and spend segments. The cool ones, pre-dawn after sunset, are when you bank rest and save water. The spenders, late morning before siesta and late afternoon while heat still lectures, are where you invest sips to keep posture, patience, and humor solvent. The bells help. When they tighten on an ascent, you pause drinking. When they stretch on good crust, you take your measured 2 seconds and let the taste tell your spine to behave. Historians still argue whether most caravans favored larger, pitch-lined skins to minimize loss, or kept them deliberately semi-porous for evaporative cooling, switching to clay or tarred containers only on the driest stretches. Your train splits the difference. One sealed girba for locked savings. One old veteran skin for daily spending that cools its own contents. The camel's schedule becomes your ledger partner. Animals drink first at the well because they carry not only your load, but your future naps. You time your longer rests to their watering cycles. A deep nap before a big drink, because the camp turns busy and drippy afterward. Or a deep nap after, when beasts go slow-eyed and still. Mainstream detail you feel in the ground. The dirtiest minutes around a well are immediately after the first buckets rise. Paws, hooves, and joy everywhere. So wise, sleepers wait for that flurry to calm before they curl. You become wise by trial, a teacher famously stingy with extra credit. You learn to weigh a girba in your palm and guess its hours. Full, it scolds your wrist. Half, it settles like a loaf. You mark the strap with charcoal at noon and check again at Asr. If the level drops faster than the sun, you adjust. The goal isn't to finish exactly at the next oasis, too dramatic, but to land with a calm surplus that lets you choose your nap without begging. Light joke number 2. Your banker would love this budget. Your past self, who impulse bought iced coffee, would not recognize you. Water taste becomes a map. You can tell Taghaza's briny wells by their metallic grin. You can taste Bilma's salt ghost even in tea. Oasis gardens upstream from foggaras pour like glass after a summer cleaning. A tired well carries a polite dust. You respect all of them. Boil the brackish, bless the sweet, and, when in doubt, make tea that forgives. A handful of mint leaves, a tumble of granules, a pour that goes high for drama and oxygen. 3 glasses, darker to lighter, the last one for the nap. You don't waste, you trade. The sugar buys attention now and rest later. The mint buys breath and a sense that your lungs learned manners. Your naps trim themselves to match the water arc. On a day with generous wind and a forgiving route, you allow a longer short nap, 20 minutes, on the leeward side of a dune, knowing you can afford one more mouthful after. On tight days, you stack tiny shorts. 7 minutes, eyes behind scarf, hand on rope, one mouthful promised only if you wake without arguing. You discover how much sleep you can fold into a single exhale if the rope lies just right in your palm, and the bell spacing says, trust. Even your camel seems to understand this game. Its chewing slows during your dozes as if to avoid dropping crumbs on the silence. Arguments travel with trade like hitchhikers. Historians still argue whether caravanners commonly added ground acacia pods or even powdered alum to suspect water to settle particulates, a trick documented in other regions, or whether the Sahara relied more on cloth filtration and patience. Your camp leans toward cloth and patience, with a side of superstition, a pebble from the last good well plunked into the skin for luck. You tell yourself it's just a memory stone. Then you find yourself checking that it's still there before you sleep. And who are you to bully your own comfort? The girba gets maintenance like a beloved instrument. At night, someone rubs it with oil to keep the leather from sulking into cracks. Seams get a whisper of warmed pitch. The wooden stopper is shaved to fit, then wrapped with a thin strip of softened reed so it sits like a gentleman and doesn't drip. You adopt a handling ritual. Never drop, never sit on, never leave in direct noon sun pretending it wants a tan. When a skin ages into perfect softness, as if it had learned your hand, you quietly name it in your head, then pretend you didn't. Light joke number 3. Yes, you've become a person who would write a thank you note to a bottle, and the bottle would deserve it. You develop thirst heuristics that stop you from auditioning for bad ideas. If your mouth feels dry but your breath is calm, wait until the next bell chime gap. If your tongue feels slow and your thoughts sharpen like they're trying too hard, drink now. If your muscles argue, change posture first. If they keep arguing, 1 mouthful, then 2 minutes of slow chewing. Dates or a fragment of travel bread, so the water has company. You learn to fear the chug more than thirst, because a chug steals choice later. In the ledger of desert days, choice is sleep. A mainstream rote reality keeps you honest. Stages between wells can be 30 to 50 kilometers on the easier lines, sometimes longer on bleak runs, and spacing varies with season and politics. The caravan leader's reputation depends on never pretending the next water is closer than it is. You imitate that honesty with yourself. When a mirage throws a lake down exactly where you wish there were one, you smile like you've seen this trick before, because you have, and you keep to your mouthfuls and your knots, and the soft promise that the palms will appear when mathematics says they should. By evening, your strap shows 3 knots left. Luxury. You save 1 for tea theatrics, 1 for after-prayer quiet, and 1 for the nap that bridges to the night march. The girba is lighter, easier in the hand, almost musical when you tilt it. You set it in the shade as if tucking a child into bed. The blue bead on the leader's bell catches the first star and winks. Your fennel pouch does its tiny perfume at your wrist. The miswak waits for its bedtime cameo. The coal you lined earlier kept its promise against glare. Your life is a tidy drawer of rituals now, and each ritual buys a little more sleep. When the guide taps the staff and the bells arrange themselves into their night grammar, you hoist the girba with affection, and check the stopper like a sailor trusting a hull. Your next stage is short. Your next nap will sit neatly between Orion and Sirius. Water, rest, distance. Numbers you repeat in a tone more lullaby than lecture. You breathe with the camel. Forward, down, glide, up. The hourglass at your hip keeps time without hurrying, and you find that you too have learned the trick. Pouring the day at exactly the right speed so that, when the stars ask for quiet, your body can answer. The bells fade to a backbeat, and the first voice slips in where the wind leaves a pocket. It isn't loud. Nothing is loud out here unless the sun is speaking, but it's definite, like a hand at your elbow guiding you through a sleepy doorway. 1 line from the lead driver, 1 line from the row behind, a little laughter tucked into the rhyme. You feel your steps fall into the syllables as if the words had been paved on the sand ahead. Verse, verse, breath. Verse, verse, breath. The song is a traveling clock, and your eyelids love punctuality. Mainstream fact to lace into the melody. Camel drivers across the Sahara and the Sahel have long used rhythmic chants, kins to the Arabic huda, to steady pace, soothe animals, and, when necessary, encourage a little extra lift. classical writers describe the way a voice can persuade a line of camels to lengthen the stride without anyone cracking a whip. You hear that persuasion now, the lead's vowels leaning forward, the consonants smoothing the sand. Your own rope hand relaxes, then remembers its job while the camel pretends to ignore the compliment. There's a grammar to this you learn fast. The first couplet sets the cadence. The second lays in a joke about a famously moody camel from last season, who, by the way, handled hills like a poet handles commas. The third one is practical. It names the next water point or the next shade, or subtle luxury, the promise of tea framed as if it were already steaming. Then a refrain, a hush you can nap inside without falling out of the saddle. Light joke number 1. Congratulations. You've joined a band where everyone knows all the lyrics and the drums are made of sand and patience. The handler at your knee shows you how to ride inside the song. He marks 4-beat phrases with a thumb on the saddle frame, an old wood metronome no app could outkind. You breathe in on the line, breathe out on the echo, and let your shoulders unclench on the tiny rest between. Each verse is a little hammock for a thought you didn't need to carry anyway. When the file hits soft crust and the bells thin, he slides a lullaby refrain into the gap. 2 notes only, lower than the wind, and you feel your mind tilt toward that careful saddle doze you've been practicing since the first night. Quirky tidbit, delivered with a grin. Some drivers swear each camel has a favorite nonsense syllable, a vowel it feels in its neck and agrees with. Heya, one likes. Aya, another. A third perks up only for who. Whether there's science in it, or just affection, doesn't concern the camels, who enjoy being the subject of poems either way. Historians still argue whether lyrics in these work songs routinely hid navigation cues, names of stars, winds, and waypoints braided into rhyme to be memorized, or whether most of the time they were simply the caravan's morale machine. Tonight, your group lets the verses do both. One name for the low pass ahead, one joke for the blue bead on the leader's bell, one prayer that the harmattan will mind its manners. The instruments here are almost all human. Still, the desert provides. At night halts, if you're lucky, someone stretches a goat skin over a mortar or an upturned bowl, tend style, and taps a heartbeat for a song that belongs to the firelight. You've seen it once, and the echo rode with you for hours afterward. On the move, a grain sieve becomes a soft shaker. A rolled mat, thumped gently, gives you a bass so shy it would rather be called weather. The line sings anyway, because rhythm is already in the camel's hips, and the rest is just permission. You begin keeping time in verses the way you once kept it in emails. 2 songs to the next rest, 1 to a sip, 3 to the post-sunset prayer. When you feel greedy for water, you bargain with a chorus. After this refrain, then. When your knees whisper about a change in slope, you let the melody carry your weight forward the way a wave carries a swimmer just above the sandbar. Light joke number 2. Somewhere your smartwatch is trying to identify this as karaoke cardio, and for once it isn't wildly wrong. The content of the songs braids life into pace. There are couplets for gear, tallow on the girth, calm on the rope. For health, Miss Walk in the pocket, jaw in a smile. For luck, blue bead behaving, bells like friends. You grin when a verse kisses your new fennel trick. Star seed in the date, sleep comes straight. And you hear 3 camels sigh as if the rhyme tasted nice. When the route needs vigilance, the leader swaps in a cautionary verse about mirage manners. Lake on the sand is water with lies, and 6 shoulders straighten without anyone announcing an alarm. A mainstream note hides inside a joke only historians tell at parties. Many Sahelian and Saharan traditions use call and response not just for beauty, but for work. Pounding grain, drawing water, lifting a heavy beam, all to redistribute effort and keep lungs honest. On the trail, you feel that utility every few lines. The response is a place to exhale, a safe handoff of attention, a chance for the lead to check the sand's mood and the star's sincerity. You nap in those respites like a polite guest who skirts the walls and never blocks the door. Counting grows gentle under lyrics. You trade hard numbers for named stanzas. Instead of 15 minutes, you think the verse about palm shade plus the one about boiling kettles. Instead of 500 steps, it's half the old wedding song. A tune you learned last Oasis from a woman who could turn a mortar into thunder with 2 fingers and a smile. Historians still argue whether the 10-day and its repertory traveled along the trade routes as a consistent cultural package, or whether songs arrived in bursts with visiting families and drifted away again. But memory doesn't care about footnotes. It cares that you can hum the kettle verse and feel your shoulders predict a nap. You had a private stanza for your own ledger. Coal at the rims and shade on the face, rope in the hand, and a soft standing pace. You don't sing it aloud, you feel shy about poetry that pets your own patience. But the line slides a tiny weight off your chest each time, and that's all you were after. You hide another couplet in your scarf about the miswak and the mint, because clean teeth and clean breath have been pulling your naps forward like a kind tide. The camel responds to certain melodic shapes in ways that feel like domestic magic. A long, slow vowel invites a lengthened neck and a smooth glide. A staccato beat tightens the line for a climb. Once, when the file spreads on a broad pan of firm sand, the famous white road you're starting to recognize, the driver tries a faster play song, and the animal under you adds a fraction of lift, as if remembering some youthful adventure. Light joke number 3. If your camel had a playlist, it would be mostly chill, with one chaotic track it pretends not to like but always speeds up for. Ritual stands next to rhythm with its hands in its pockets, smiling at how you've changed. When the leader's voice dips into the low refrain that means end of block, you feel your fingers reach for the rope loop automatically, the body assuming it is time for a blink-long doze. When the joking couplet appears, the one about sand complaining to the wind that people keep rearranging it, you know that means sip now, not later, and your hand moves without waking your brain. The song is training you the way gentle routines train children. Repetition, warmth, permission. Debate sneaks back in on a soft breeze. Historians still argue whether professional poets and praise singers routinely attached themselves to caravans as hired companions, turning trade into a moving salon, or whether most long hauls relied on the drivers themselves to carry the music. Either way, you discover you like the democracy of these voices. The line belongs to everyone, and talent is judged by how kindly the rhythm holds the ankles, not how cleverly the rhyme bows. When the moon lifts, the repertoire shifts to night keys. The words thin into humming, and humming thins into something halfway between song and prayer. You feel it in your neck bones. The whole file is swaddled in the same lullaby, and you're free to spend a nap you saved earlier. Rope looped, breath slow, eyes behind scarf. You allow 4 lines to pass like clouds, and then 5 more for good measure. The camel, apparently satisfied with your technique, chooses not to file any paperwork. By the time stars tilt toward the promise of tea, you have a library in your mouth. There's a march verse for measuring dunes, a kettle verse for forgiving brackish water with mint and heat, a Miss Walk verse that makes you smile in your sleep because it rhymes pepper with proper, and a little two-liner about the blue bead that now feels like an old friend's wink. You realize that you haven't asked the hour once. The songs told you. They told you when to drink, when to step, when to curl, when to lift your head, when to laugh, when to do nothing at all. And in return you gave them the best thing you had. Attention with its sharp corners sanded, a body that listens to rhythm instead of panic, a nap placed exactly between two refrains where it belongs. You start noticing how the quietest people talk the most with their hands, their shoulders, their way of stopping before a dune like a reader pausing at a comma. The Imushag Pathfinders, Tuareg guides wrapped in indigo dusk, don't announce lessons. They arrange them the way they arrange shade and wind. One pinches a bit of sand, lets it ribbon from his fingertips, then points to the crescent of a Barchan dune, as if introducing you to a neighbor. Horns lean downwind. Slip face sleeps on the lee. Stoss side meets the breeze with a practiced shoulder. Not there, he murmurs of the steep slip face, unless you want to wake up sliding. You file that under noted, alongside the rope loop, the coal line, and your fennel star snack. They read tamarisk like a trustworthy headline. A single scruffy shrub in the middle of nothing is just a patient optimist. A line of tamarisks, wind-carved and gossiping, means a lens of groundwater or an old seep. Mainstream fact to anchor your new botany. Tamarisk, salt cedar, tolerates saline soils and drinks deep, so its clusters often signal slight moisture and firmer substrate. Exactly the combination that can gift you a safe halt with fewer surprise sinkings. You learn the folk rule that sounds like poetry because it is. Where the tamarisk combs the wind, the sand keeps its promise. Ground truth arrives foot level. The guide taps the surface with his staff and listens. Thin crust over powder says, no camp. Desert meringue that collapses under hoof and naps alike. Desert pavement, flat stones tight as scales, says, yes, a reg that holds stakes and does not sneak into your blankets at night. He shows you the interdune feather formed where wind has been polite. Lie on the feather, not the throat. Light joke number 1. The desert is a bird if you squint, and your job is not to nap in its beak. You start spotting dangers you would have called scenery yesterday. A sabka, salt pan glazed like a cracked mirror, tempts with its flatness, but the guide points to a dull dampness beneath the sheen and shakes his head. Camp there, and you'll wake with damp blankets and wobbly tempers. A shallow wadi, pleasantly low, generously wide, looks like a place to stretch, but the lore is stern. Never sleep where water once felt at home, because storms in far mountains send guests you didn't invite. Historians still argue whether flash floods shaped caravan schedules as strictly on these long Saharan spines as they did in tighter desert canyons elsewhere. Yet every old driver you meet treats wadis with a respect that sounds like memory. Camels write footnotes you learn to read. When the lead animal hesitates, sniffs, and chooses a spot with ears angled a particular way, that's a wind shelter you should adopt without arguing. If the whole line kneels unprompted and turns backs to the breeze, your map just gained a nap symbol. The guide laughs silently at how fast you copy the camel's posture, then adjusts your blanket angle a finger width so the eddy curls over your head like friendly surf. Quirky tidbit, offered with a grin. Some handlers carry a sliver of polished horn or a brass spoon they press into the surface. If the sand grips and releases with a dry squeak, they call it good violin, a sign the crust will hold tent pegs. Your ear goes to school. You listen for the tiny music and decide you'll name your next nap allegretto. They add a set of nevers and always that taste like proverbs. Never lay your head downhill unless you want your dreams to roll away. Always camp 2 camel lengths from any bush that hosts ants with opinions. Never sleep on the windward nose of a dune unless you enjoy exfoliation you didn't ask for. Always check for beetle highways. The glossy tracks mean the surface is looser than it looks. Light joke number 2. If a beetle leaves a 4-lane highway, your blanket will leave a gravel road on your cheeks. You collect visual algebra for distance and safety. Long sea ice dunes, rail straight and parallel, tell you the wind has a major you can harmonize with. Angle your camp so the ridges become fences that never tangle your ropes. Crescent barchins marching like a herd of commas. Tuck into the curve, not the gap. Yardangs, wind-sculpted ridges like rows of giant loaves, are beautiful, but their gutters funnel gusts. You pick the lee of the second loaf, not the first. Mainstream note to staple to your growing glossary. Barchans open their horns downwind. Saafs align with prevailing winds. Both names traveled into science through observations in places like this, where guides had already given them practical names nobody thought to footnote. They point out cairns, small stacks of stones no taller than your knee, and you learn they're not random. Some mark safe crossings over hard-to-see pans. Others whisper directions when the stars sulk behind dust. This one? The guide taps a pile with an indigo knuckle. Sleep behind if the wind is mean. Historians still argue whether the Tifinagh letters you sometimes see scratched into rocks along these routes were practical route notes for passers-by, lineage marks, or mostly moments of identity saying we were here. You trace a few straight-line signs with a finger and feel, absurdly and correctly, that someone's old calm is attending your nap. The Imushag are allergic to drama, and their rules for halts reflect it. Pitch low, stake few, well. Anchor lines with bags of sand rather than pegs where crust is fickle. Keep a tidy yard so ropes don't audition as tripwires in the dark. Turn the kettle windward so smoke won't court your lungs while you're halfway to sleep. Remember your goat hair panel. They remind you to tension it until it hums softly, the note that means it will shed a rare shower rather than hold it. Light joke number 3. If your shade starts playing a sad song, you've tuned it to complaint. You add scent and sound to the map. Tamarisk sings faintly when wind braids its twigs. That song, to a practiced ear, tells gust from steady breath. Acacia smells nutty when the sun sulks, resin sweet when it forgives. A resin coil smoldering at the edge of camp draws a polite border for flies and for thoughts. You place your girba where shade will fall later, because you now preposition cool like a chess player, setting traps for heat. Your miswak sits on the windward mat corner, the mint and pepper prelude that tells your brain it can power down soon. The blue bead on the leader's bell gets one more wink as if blessing the spot. Mainstream fact anchors the romance. Tuareg-led assault caravans, Azalai, from Taudeni, and earlier Taghaza, have for centuries threaded these dunes toward Timbuktu and Gao, their guides prized precisely for this lore of wind, face, and shrub. Those trains set their halts by the same rules now handing you sleep. It feels good to belong to a competence older than your grandparents' stories. You ask about singing dunes, the bass hum some sands produce when they slide, and the guide nods, amused. Yes, he says, but don't camp on a musician if you want quiet. You imagine waking to the earth doing a cello impression under your ribs, and decide that's a concert for another trip. Historians still argue whether moisture levels, grain size, or a secret choir of variables makes the song, but all agree a dune that hums can surprise. You choose one that purrs instead. Even the fire gets placed by a proverb you repeat under your breath. Cook where smoke tells secrets only to the wind. That means the downwind edge of the lee, not the camp's heart. Tea becomes ritual architecture. First glass strong enough to recommend sitting down. Second, sociable. Third, dessert. You keep your promise and take the last glass as a bridge to rest. Your sugar ledger aligning with your nap ledger in a small act of domestic diplomacy. You test the ground the way the guide did earlier. Palm flat, slow 7 count, and decide it speaks warm, not unkind. You place sandals where morning will find them cool. You loosen your scarf from march to nest, and you lie with your head just uphill, your cheek in the soft cup you've learned to make without thinking. The wind moves over the camp like a mother smoothing blankets. Camels settle with 3 mutual sighs. Somewhere beyond the tamarisk, a beetle writes a single punctuation mark and is satisfied. Right before you close your eyes, the guide scratches a tiny Tifinagh sign in a patch of hard sand. Just a memo to the next quiet traveler that this pocket is friendly when the wind leans so. Maybe it's practical, maybe it's poetry. Either way, it feels like courtesy in a language you're beginning to understand. You feel the rope in your hand without gripping it. The bell's possible chime without needing it. The fennel sweet under your tongue without chasing more. The Imushag have been teaching you how to read, and now the desert reads you back as someone who knows where to put a nap, so it will take. You arrive where the ground is made of the very thing the world came to fetch. Taghaza doesn't look like a town so much as a white memory of one. Low walls and roof lines built from stacked salt blocks mortared with, what else? More salt, then skinned with camel hides so the rare rain won't lick the place to pieces. Mainstream fact worth tucking under your headscarf. Travelers like Leo Africanus described these salt towns as literally constructed of salt, their houses squared like loaves, their wells brackish as old stories. Caravans fed entire regions by hauling the pale rectangles south toward Timbuktu and Gao. The first breeze that meets you tastes like a pinch from the sea. Your tongue is too polite to complain. Your girba is already planning tea. Everything here moves on a loading rhythm, so your naps do too. Camels kneel in rows, serious as librarians. Men with iron bars lever slabs from trench edges and slide them onto sledges. A team flips and trims, scraping corners to prevent future temper tantrums on the trail. Your handler clucks and measures with his eyes. 2 bundles this side, 2 that side. Rope a snug X over the hump. A final cinch the camel pretends not to notice. You feel the air's temperature climb just from all the attention. Light joke number 1. Your new job title is assistant to a very heavy briefcase, and the briefcase hums and occasionally burps. Patience is a safety device here. Salt that's roped too loose rubs and sings until a camel swings its head to file a complaint with the entire line. Salt that's roped too tight pinches and makes the animal plot a slow-motion sit-in 3 dunes later. The guide's time micro-rests between loads so tempers never get a head start. You learn the 2-slab pause, a ritual 10-breath stand down after each side is balanced, so backs and bellies can vote yes. During those pauses, you practice the art of the quick curl. Knead a blanket, cheek to old familiar hollow. Rope looped once, bell spacing memorized. When the iron bar clinks again, you surface as if someone called your name in your favorite tone. Quirky tidbit the miners share with a grin. Down in the trench, the walls glitter with halos where briny water once dried. They call those rings bracelets for the wrist of the world. Superstition says a crumb tucked into your scarf makes you steadier, like the earth lending you a spine. Whether that's chemistry or charm, you accept the gift. After all, you've already been collecting small kindnesses. Coal against glare, fennel folded into date paste, the blue beads wink. Historians still argue whether salt labor here was mostly seasonal free work, penal servitude under imperial orders, or a tangled mix that changed with the century. The ground remembers all of it without taking sides, and you respect the memory by keeping your steps careful at the trench edge. Your water plan adapts to the brine. Taghaza's wells pour with a salinity that makes tea the diplomat you need. Boil, mint, sugar, a pour from high so oxygen shakes hands with heat. Your ledger changes units. 1 mouthful per song becomes 1 glass per load stage. When the second line of camels finishes their X ropes, you get the second glass. When the last slab is coaxed into submission and the bell thong checked for a friendly timbre, the third glass anchors a nap you can feel from eyebrows to ankles. Light joke number 2. If hydration strategy had a marketing department, it would definitely use mint and poor theatrics. The economy hums around you like a big, polite engine. Salt slabs stack into pale cuboids that look like someone tried to build a chess set for giants. Merchants argue happily about grain, cloth, copper trinkets, books wrapped in leather. Mainstream note to keep the map honest. For centuries, these salt roads threaded the Sahara north and south, swapping slabs for gold dust and cola nuts and knowledge. In some eras, certain markets levied gate taxes by the camel, in others by the slab. Historians still argue whether the famous claim that salt and gold traded by equal weight describes a norm, a few hot seasons, or simply traveler shorthand. But either way, your back believes the salt's value. You lean into the choreography now that you know it. Load 2, nap a sliver. Check the girth with the tallow finger, nap a sliver. Help pass the sacking that cushions the lowest slab against the saddle rails, nap a sliver. It's not laziness, it's logistics. Little rests keep your attention from becoming brittle. Your camel, veteran of a dozen salt seasons, approves by not sighing too loudly when you adjust the rope angle a thumb's breadth. The bell you dusted earlier with a smudge of oil answers with a lower, calmer ring. Desert violin tuned to lullaby rather than lecture. Taghaza has its own songs, you discover. Shorter, workmanlike. Couplets to count lever strokes. Refrains that name who stands where at the stack. A teasing line for the handler who always pretends the last knot is the official final knot, and then ties 2 more for luck. You put your breath in the gaps, a safe place to place a blink. When the pause between verses widens, you fold that into a 2-minute leeward curl beside a stack of pale blocks that radiate cool like polite company. The rope is a question mark at your fingers. The bell says yes. The miner's schedule pushes you into the forgiving parts of day. The heaviest lifting crouches in the cool. Late night, early morning. That means your big nap waits for midday shade behind a wall that smells like seaside and patience. You angle your goat hair panel to make a pocket where the breeze forgets the dust. You dampen a scarf edge for that tiny evaporative sigh you've come to crave. Set your girba in the shade to learn good habits, and lie on your side just uphill, the way the Imushag taught you when sand faces are steep. Remember the beetle highways. You check. None today, so your cheek won't wear tracks. A merchant from Timbuktu, ink on his fingers and dust on his cuffs, recites a ledger like a lullaby. Slabs counted, camels queued, gate hours at the city, rumors of price. He smiles at your blue bead bell and calls it preemptive diplomacy. He's full of calm facts you tuck into the soft part of your brain that holds sleep. Gate guards like an early arrival. Tea stalls welcome news. Scribes appreciate neat bundles and neater handwriting. You picture the city's earthen walls emerging at dawn 2 or 3 days from now, and that picture adds weight to the nap you're saving. A small debate curls like steam over the kettle. Historians still argue whether Taghaza's salt was primarily managed under Songhai accountants from Gao or under shifting arrangements of local clans and entrepreneurial miners, and how much each period spiced the trade with taxes, gifts, and politely enforced recommendations. Your guides shrug in the practical way you've learned to love. Pay fair, leave early, tie the good knots. You translate that to your business. Sleep when the load cycle allows. Wake when the iron bar rings. Keep your patience tight and your ropes looser than your jaw. The train finally leans south, a long pale spine with small black punctuation marks where people walk. Camel tempers settle once the slabs stop squeaking against each other and start thinking like one big, confident rectangle. Bells stretch to their travel spacing. The first verse of the road song drops like a soft flag. You time a saddle doze between the second and third stanza, spend a mouthful at the fourth, and hold everything until the fifth, when the line crests a low saddle and the wind goes from chatty to humming. Light joke number 3. Your smartwatch declares this resistance training, which is adorable, given that your main resistance is to panic and your primary gains are naps. Southbound, your ledger becomes a story about markets. You picture the Sahelian stalls where salt will shave thin for soup, where gold dust hides in feather-light leather pouches, where scribes sell blessings in ink, where students hum texts under neem trees. The rhythm of loading has sharpened your senses. Now you can tell by the rope's tone if a slab has shifted a whisper, by the camel's ear flick if the balance feels cranky, by the bell's mood if the line needs a verse or a minute of silence. You tuck each micro-lesson beside the old ones. Palm shadow clocks, miswak resets, fennel star snacks, the white road's generous crust, until your journey feels less like a survival exercise and more like a very precise ritual in which the reward for doing things kindly is sleep that arrives when invited. When evening gathers, you give the slabs a last small thump to settle them, the way you pat a stack of books before you rise from the table, and you follow the guide's staff into a leeward cradle shaped exactly like a good idea. Tea makes its 3 small speeches. Prayers fold dusk into night. You spread your blanket in the hush that always follows a day of honest work and honest wait. And your body, which learned to nap between iron clank and rope rasp, slides into rest so smoothly you barely hear the last bell checking that its voice still shines. Salt towns fall behind like pale commas in the long sentence of the desert, and you, punctuated properly, close your eyes. You learn to read thirsty light the way you've been reading bells and sand. Ahead, the lake wobbles in the heat. Sky blue on the ground, a perfect temptation. You hold your breath, narrow your eyes behind the scarf, and wait for the trick to admit itself. It does. The shoreline keeps retreating like a shy cat. Palm shadows don't decorate its edge. No birds argue over it. The imushag calls it by its unromantic name and gives you the physics in the two gestures. Hot air near the surface bends the light upward. The sky falls to the floor. Mainstream fact tucked under the cheche. Inferior mirages rise from steep temperature gradients, the refractive index shifting so ground acts like a mirror for the sky. Sea mirage on land, while rarer inversions stack images into the layered, palace-looking Fata Morgana. Out here, the rules are kind if you are. Water makes bolder promises. Reflections of palms, stubborn birds, the color green with a memory. Mirages, no matter how theatrical, never rustle, never throw shade that stays put. You treat shimmer like weather. Observe, don't argue. The guide teaches a trick you'll use forever. Crouch low and look across your knuckles with the hand shaded by your scarf. Real water darkens when a breeze ruffles it. Mirage light slides without texture. A quirky tidbit that comes with an indulgent grin. Some drivers wave a scarf near the ground and watch its reflection. If the bright ribbon follows with perfect obedience, it's just sky pretending. If it answers with a lag and a scatter, you might be looking at something wet enough to deserve your interest. Science can quibble about optics later. For now, you store the gesture next to the rope loop, the coal line, the miswak brush, and the fennel star snack. Shimmer teaches you where to nap, too. Illusion thrives over broad pans and sun-polished flats, the exact places your skin would complain about sleeping anyway. Shade, meanwhile, collects where wind does small kindnesses. You start scouting the leeward curls of dunes the way a city person hunts for cafe corners. Pockets where breeze slows, sound softens, and the world decides you are uninteresting. You walk the ridge with your camel, step down one side until your ankles say, too steep, then back up to the shoulder where the sand purrs. A leeward pocket is the shape of a sigh, and you pitch your body in a little farther each time until you feel yourself become the punctuation you've been placing along the road. Comma, comma, comma. Building shade is carpentry with grammar rules. Low, never tall. The wind is a picky editor. It red pencils hubs and heights and rewards lines that slope and breathe. You set saddlebags as anchors. Lay a mat from bag to bag in a shallow V. Then pull a goat hair panel across so its weave hums just a note above silence. Remember the trick from harmattan days? Tilt the roof to vent hot air. Widen the downwind opening so the breeze doesn't sulk. You stitch the corners with guy lines buried under quick sand anchors, 2 bagfuls tamped flat, because pegs sometimes lie in soft crust. Light joke number 1. Congratulations. You now qualify as a desert interior designer, specialty in open concept floor plans and aggressively natural lighting. Mirage control becomes nap control, because the wrong lake can bully a camp into poor choices. You don't chase the blue, you court the beige. The tamarisk line you learned to trust in the last stretch shows you where the ground holds its promise. The guide taps an interdune feather and says, "Here." You do the palm test. Hand flat, 7 slow counts, and feel warm, not unkind. There's a low moo-moo of wind that agrees with your lungs. You tuck sandals under the mat edge, place the girba where the shade will be an hour from now. Future you is very grateful. And loosen the scarf from march to nest. The rope lies in a friendly question mark under your fingers. The bell waits to answer yes. A mainstream note arrives with the shovel you didn't know you packed. A shallow scrape. just a few centimeters, drops you into cooler sand because surface grains hoard heat while their buried cousins keep polite secrets. Nomads all over dry lands have known this longer than thermometers. Dig the smallest cradle, and conduction stops being a scold. You carve a crescent for shoulder and hip, a thimble for the water bowl so it leans with minimal evaporating face, a trench like a smile for the wind to follow under the mat. The earth answers by speaking 1 degree lower to your skin. Your body takes the hint. The debate that wanders through every campfire rises softly here too. Historians still argue whether famous lost cities sighted on the horizon in travelers' tales were born of Fata Morgana mirages stretched by story, or whether those reports folded ruins, dust storm walls, and wishful cartography into one shimmering memory. Your guides, literate in dunes, skeptical in the best way, shrug the way people do who walk the facts. Cities don't float. Air sometimes lies. A rumor can walk 1,000 miles on 2 good sandals. You find you like the humility in that answer. It pairs well with naps. Windbreaks are not walls. They're social boundaries. You build them knee-high, a suggestion rather than a declaration, and you make them long enough that gusts have a cue to stand in. A line of sacks along the windward lip, a folded mat at a whispering angle, the goat hair panel snugged just so. Smoke from the brazier tells you when the geometry is right. It leans out and then sighs, not back into your face. You tee the moment in, of course. Glass 1 stern and dark, glass 2 good company, glass 3 the lullaby glass. Light joke number 2. If your smartwatch had any dignity left, it would rename this phase Advanced Aerodynamics and Beverage Studies. Mirage's cousin, glare, gets its own manners. You touch coal to your lids again, the line you've trusted since Section 1, and find the world's contrast sharpens without shouting. You lower the chechi over your cheeks at the angle the imushag showed you, indigo tint making the sand look less eager to audition as a mirror. Your eyes thank custom and pigment both. Quirky pocket wisdom surfaces with the mint. A slice of dried lime sucked slowly tells your brain water is on the way, easing the greedy part of thirst. Its flavor as diplomacy. You let the pucker turn into a long exhale and feel your shoulders move 2 millimeters closer to nap. You lie down, knees loose, forehead nearly touching the woven shadow. Sound narrows to the comfortable trinity you've been courting for days. Fabric hush, camel jaw, a bell's hypothetical. The mirage out on the flats keeps shifting like a rumor that needs attention. You give it none. You've built a different lake, a small, cool pool of air that stays. Mainstream practice sprawls under your cheekbone. Real caravans often posted a light watch while the rest slept. 2 handlers up, eyes on animals and horizon, so the sleepers could let go without bargaining. Your pair sit a little upwind, sleeves rolled, soft voices calculating tea math and gate times for the next town. Trust is a hammock shared by many poles. There's always room for one last mild experiment. You flip your scarf end so a narrow cat-eye slit frames the world. The visual diet shrinks to one calm rectangle. The mind loves boxes. It relaxes when the frame is kind. The camel closest to your ankles sighs what you've decided is its respectful approval. Light joke number 3. Somewhere your smartwatch logs mindfulness minutes, and for once you let it keep the trophy. After 10 breaths, you slide into the kind of catnap that acts bigger than it is. The windbreak keeps buffets from becoming paragraphs. The shallow scrape keeps heat from writing memos up your spine. The goat hair roof sings its small note. The mirage, starved of your attention, wanders off to audition for another traveler. When you fold back into wakefulness, the world feels fractionally cooler, measurably friendlier. You uncoil the rope, check the girba, one mouthful now, one later, and run the miswak along your teeth with that pepper-sweet reset you've learned to trust. On the ridge, the guide gestures toward a distant, honest green, the kind with birds, the kind that throws shade that stays. You picture palms and channels and a place to test the windbreak again, lower and wider, with a little trench for the kettle to sit in out of the gusts. You grin at the thought that your best naps keep getting built like small houses you disassemble and carry with you. A measure of wind, a fold of mat, a habit of not believing lakes that behave too beautifully. As the line reforms, bells find their travel spacing. The mirage glitters one last time and then collapses into the truth of sky. You keep your lesson on the top shelf of memory, beside the white road's crust, the blue beads wink, the Taghaza slabs, the beetle highways, the salt town tea, and that quiet rule about never sleeping in a wadi's old bed. When the camel stands, your stomach does its gentle elevator. Your ledger shows a neat deposit of ease, and the wind, satisfied with your engineering, escorts you out of the pocket you made into the broad sentence of sand. You walk on, not fooled by light, very pleased by shade, and carrying, tucked under your rib, a tiny, portable lake that answers to the name of rest. You start building a map you could walk with your eyes closed, the kind that hums more than it draws. The Aimu Shag smile because this is their favorite part, turning the desert into a song you can carry in your mouth when paper isn't welcome. They show you how to string place names like beads, each with a texture. A beer, well, with a sweet lip, a reg, stone plain, that clicks under sandals, an erg, dune sea, that purrs, a wadi that shouldn't be trusted with naps, a low kantara of rock that does a passable impression of a bridge. You thread naps between those names until rest itself becomes a landmark. Sleep after the tamarisk combs the wind. Doze when the white road tilts. Long lie down 3 songs past the salt town verse. You take the rope in your palm and let it teach you distances. Loops become reminders. 1 loop for the next pebble cairn. 2 for the saddle where the breeze behaves. 3 for the shallow scrape you'll dig before noon. Knots on the girba strap are your water time, but now they're also your memory pegs. A knot for the oasis with dragonfly handwriting. A slightly thicker knot for the briny well your tea forgave with mint. A knot tied with a smile for the garden that grew fennel. The star snack now promoted to morale officer. Light joke number 1. You have, in effect, become a walking spreadsheet with excellent scarf game. Mainstream fact to hold steady like a staff. Traders and guides across the Sahara preserved routes in oral itineraries, chains of stages, Mirahill, well names, star cues, and market days, while scholars from al-Bakri to later geographers wrote distances from well to well, rather than in abstract miles. You feel that logic now. 2 lullabies to Tin Fazwat, the guide says, 1 prayer to the low saddle that looks like a sleeping lion, half a verse to the tamarisk that combs to the left. Numbers are honest, names are kinder. Pebble cues turn the blank into a sentence you can read. The guide hands you a little pouch with 3 kinds of stones, pale, dark, and 1 striped as if a zebra had passed through geology. Pale for slope ahead, dark for pan to circumnavigate, striped for camp pocket, do not overshoot. When the line bends around a feature in darkness, under Orion's belt or the gentle cluster of Althariah, you slip the matching pebble into your palm and let the texture prompt the next choice. Quirky tidbit that makes the handlers grin. Some old drivers keep a favorite seed pod instead of a stone. Rattle for ridge, smooth for plain, curled for oasis. And swear the sound keeps memory from napping too hard. Whether that's craft or comfort is between the pod and the pocket. You add a layer of song that isn't exactly music, more like speaking with rhythm. The root verse you learned back near Taghaza gets stitched to a fresh couplet about the Beetle highways. Avoid them unless you want cheek tracks. To another about the blue bead behaving. To a new line about the yardangs that look like loaves. Camp behind the second, not the first. You build a column of when sleep refrains. After the bell thins. When the wind hums, not scolds. If coal keeps contrast and mirage keeps lying. You can feel your map take shape inside your mouth. You experiment with a memory palace, desert edition. Instead of rooms, you use oases. Instead of shelves, you use palms. On the first tree, you hang the miswak twig. Pepper sweet reset. On the second, the brass spoon for testing good violin sand. On the third, the fennel pouch. On the fourth, a rolled goat hair panel humming one small note. Each item conjures a rule, and each rule earns a nap. When you pass that grove again on the return, the whole palace lights up like a quiet lantern, and you can feel which shade patch was warm, not unkind. Your ears join the cartography corps. Bells map slope just as before, but now you translate timbre into direction. A higher, tighter ring from ahead means firmer crust and longer lines. Good for rhythm, bad for knee-jerk naps. A lower, rounder chime with more sand in it means slip faces nearby. Watch the angle, plan the leeward pocket. The guide shows you how a single clink from the staff against a buried stone can mark a turn for the whole file. 3 short taps for crest the ridge. 2 long for keep the contour. Light joke number 2. You are now fluent in a language where punctuation is performed by a stick and commas are made of shade. You learn to name wind the way you named stars. A steady north-northeast with powdered donut air. Call it harmattan's polite cousin and move your big nap to noon. A late afternoon southerly that smells faintly of the Sahel's green promises. Save an extra micro rest for after Maghrib. The night march will be generous. The Imushag have wind nicknames, and you borrow them. The librarian for a hush that keeps pages open. The gossip for a breeze that changes its mind. The auntie for a well-meant gust that rearranges your hair and your goat hair roof in the same breath. Memory loves names. You love naps. The alliance is obvious. The stones themselves start whispering roots. On the reg, you watch for small cairns with a certain posture. 2 flat, 1 round, 1 flat again, that mean safe pan crossing, rather than someone was bored. Sometimes a Tifinagh letter is scratched nearby, just enough to say, yes, you, without drawing attention. Historians still argue whether most of these marks were genuine navigational notes, lineage signposts, or simply momentary declarations of presence. But whatever their origin, your line treats them like postcards from competence. When you bed down 2 camel lengths leeward of a marked stone and sleep like a letter finally mailed, you care less about the epigraph and more about the grammar of rest it supported. Place names pile up like kind acquaintances. In Zais, a name that feels round in the mouth. Bir el Khadra. You can taste the green even if the water is mostly poetry. Actual something. You stop mid-pronunciation because the wind steals the rest. You mispronounce too. The guides fix them with a smile and a story. The story becomes a peg, and the peg becomes a schedule. We nap after the man with the ink joke, you tell yourself, and the route clicks into place as if you'd always known it. Mainstream detail hiding in plain hearing. Across the Maghreb and the Sahel, scholars, merchants, and poets shared the same roads. Many place names have multiple registers: Arabic, Tamashek, Songhay, each pulling a different memory out of the same dust. A fringe trick gets offered with a raised eyebrow. Some swear by holding a pebble in the mouth on long dry stretches to encourage saliva and trick thirst into patience. You try it, decide it makes you feel like a chicken with opinions, and demote it to maybe for emergencies. Historians still argue whether that habit meaningfully changes hydration or mostly occupies the mouth so the mind behaves. But either way, you find you prefer the dried lime slice. Flavor plus diplomacy beats Pebble Theater. At night, the star map overlays the word map. You line Orion's belt east-west as you did before, but now each star cluster triggers a place name rhythm. Belt, Tinfazwat, Bright Drop, Sirius, Low Saddle, Cluster, Al-Thuraya, Nap Pocket. When Suhail, Canopus, peaks low, the guides nod as if an old friend joined the march, and your feet answer with a stride you didn't have in the first week. The Milky Way tilts toward the southern horizon, and you whisper the kettle verse because the white road usually follows. Your mental map becomes a duet. Sky sings the melody. Ground hums the harmony. Naps fall on the rests. You keep a tiny ledger in the indigo hem of your cheche. 3 careful stitches you unpick and remake each evening. 1 stitch for found shade in sense, not hope. 1 for drank when rope hand said drink. 1 for napped exactly where the song said. It's small, private bookkeeping, but it keeps your head gentle with yourself. Light joke number 3. You're essentially giving yourself gold stars, and if you could, you'd stick one on your camel. Except it would pretend not to care and then walk taller. Sometimes memory has to admit weather. A dust veil erases the far ridge that was supposed to be your cue. A gust edits out the bell you listen for. That's when the guides teach your last, most useful map, the one made of habits. If you can't see the tamarisk comb, you still know how to build a windbreak knee-high and kind. If Orion sulks behind gauze, you still know the cadence of 3 songs to a sip. If the cairn hides in glare, your palm still finds warm, not unkind, for a nap scrape. Historians still argue whether formal rote poems existed as fixed, recited texts, or whether every caravan assembled its own anthology from shared stanzas. But your anthology works. You turn pages in your head, and the desert nods. By the time the Sahel's breath starts to seep into the night air, faint green, faint damp, you can walk the next stage in your mind from bell to bell and nap to nap. The city's name waits like a soft drum at the end of the verse. The gate hours sit on your tongue with mint. You straighten your coal line for the last dark miles. Tighten the blue bead's thong so it winks at the first star. Check the girba. Smooth the goat hair panel one more time, and feel the map hum under your ribs. When the guide taps the staff and the file gathers, you move. Left foot, right foot, forward, down, glide, up. The road unrolls from your memory to your ankles, and sleep slots neatly into the rests you planted for it long before you arrived. The wall arrives before the city does, a long, earthen hush as dawn rinses the sky. You smell it first. Dust that's learned manners, wood smoke thinking about waking, a far-off sweetness from millet porridge. The line gathers its vowels, bells thin to courtyards of sound. You've timed the last nap like a letter you wanted to arrive exactly when the postman knocks. One blink-long doze while Orion tips, another in the hush after Fajr. Then you settle into the watchful calm of people who mean to be exactly on time for gates. A rectangle of banco rises ahead, its surface combed by hands that know how to make mud behave. Wooden Tehran beam ends poke out like the rungs of scaffolds the air forgot to put away. Mainstream fact to pin beside your coal. Sahelian mosques and city walls in places like Timbuktu and Jenne are built of sun-dried earthen bricks, their projecting timbers serving as permanent scaffolding for the annual replastering that keeps rain from making opinions. The gatehouse sits where two giant doors meet in a handshake, still half asleep. You feel absurdly formal about your posture, which your camel interprets as good, finally. Outside the wall, caravans stack into temporary neighborhoods, tents low, kettles promising steam, ropes coiled like commas at the ends of sentences you're not finished writing. The guide points to a strip of shade along a buttress where wind raps kindly. 10 minutes, he says, and you translate that into your new units. One lullaby refrain. One glass of stern tea cooling to friendly. One miswak scrub that convinces the tongue to announce the morning as acceptable. Light joke number 1. You are about to have a more punctual nap than most meetings you've ever attended. You lay your blanket where the wall's shadow reaches, head just uphill. Rope a question mark under your fingers. You touch water to your hands for wudu, the dawn ablution, and the gesture feels like setting the day's first timer. If the girbas are shy after the night march, you brush clean sand over your palms and forearms for tayammum, permission in dust. Then pray with the others, shoulder to shoulder in the leeward hush, while the gate dreams its last few minutes. When you lower your hands, the city is listening back. You let your eyelids drift for exactly the length of steam rising from a kettle and losing its temper. Vendors yawn awake on the other side of the door, and the market's rehearsal starts. A pestil's thud from a courtyard. A goose complaining about being a goose. A boy laughing like he invented morning. You wake at the soft clack of a big key in a big lock. A quirky tidbit you'll keep for future stories. Some gatekeepers tie a strip of indigo cloth or a small cluster of cowries to the ring of their keys. A pocket charm for good traffic and untroubled thresholds. Whether it's luck or habit, the ring flashes blue when the doors yaw, and your camel, bevel-headed sage that it is, decides this bodes well for tea. Historians still argue whether gate hours in Sahelian cities were tightly fixed, opening at dawn, shutting at dusk with curfew, or flexed for caravan season, weather, and the arrival of important trains. Journals disagree. Customs vary. Your guides move with the practiced ambiguity of people who have always planned to be early. The doors breathe and swing. A cool tongue of city air slides over your scarf. You fall in with the file. Bells spaced just enough to turn a narrow street into music. Inside, the geometry softens. Banco walls curve like patient shoulders. Doorways wear wooden lintels patterned with chisels that liked their work. Little windows drowse under eyebrows of mud. A boy with indigo-stained hands trots past carrying a tea tray that does a small high-wire act. 3 glasses, foamy as gossip. You recognize the pour. The kettle high, the stream thin as a string pulled by a polite violin. the foam crowned just for pride. Mainstream reality with sugar on top. Across the Western Sahara and Sahel, the green tea ritual, 3 glasses, bitter, then better than sweet. Anchors social mornings, and caravans buy their way into the city's rhythm 1 glass at a time. Your rope hand lets the wrist do the guiding while your eyes taste the architecture. A mosque angles into view, its mihrab-facing wall quiet as a held breath. Toron cast striped shadows you could rest your cheek on. Students sit with wooden tablets under a neem, lips moving in the steady hum of memory, their teacher's stick making punctuation in the dust. You count the naps you owe yourself and decide to pay 1 small installment at the next courtyard, where a water seller's clay jar, porous, sweating, miraculous, breathes cool into the air. Light joke number 2. You have found the greatest invention of all time, and it is an earthen jar that knows how to exhale. Business approaches like a friendly tide. At a side gate near the caravanserai, a scribe with neat ink on his fingers glances up from a ledger and marks arrivals. A scale waits for salt proof and gold honesty. A guard invents a dignified lean that says both welcome and behave. Your handler does the talking. You practice the art of staying quietly obvious. Calm face, rope steady, bell friendly. When the file pauses for the tally, this many camels, this many slabs, you slide into a micro-rest you didn't even know you'd saved. 2 breaths, 1 blink, the softest snore from the camel behind you, or maybe you'll never admit it. You surface smiling because the city smells like mint and wet dust and new bread. You tuck small comforts into the morning like coins into an old coat. The fennel date star snack, promoted to arrival candy. The miswak, a quick, bright sweep so your mouth tells the city, peace. Coal? Touched up because these streets reflect light in a way that flatters cheekbones but surprises pupils. Your blue bead on the leader's bell makes 1 theatrical wink at the first sunbeam to find its job. You decide the bead has earned every superstition pinned to it. A water carrier nods at your girba. You nod back with the complicated gratitude of someone whose naps are powered by the kindness of containers. Work happens quietly at the caravanserai. An inward-looking courtyard with shaded bays, a well you greet like a cousin, and a register that could double as a bedtime story if anyone read it aloud. Loads ease down, shoulders shake out, handshakes take the place of rope tugs. Someone brings a tray, glass 1, stern, glass 2, sociable, glass 3. Lullaby. You are cautious with stern today. City tea can sprint. You reach the lullaby glass and feel your bones accepted as a signed permission slip. Light joke number 3. Your smartwatch declares you sedentary, and you declare your smartwatch uncultured. The guide allocates naps and errands like a choir director handing out parts. 2 handlers to the camels for brushing and a nosebag's worth of pellets. 1 to the scribe, 1 to the salt counter. You to the leeward corner where a shadow from the arcade stays put even as the sun begins its famous commentary. You set the goat hair panel at knee height to make a tiny private breeze. You wedge the girba at the angle that presents the smallest evaporative face. You make the shallow scrape you've made 100 times now. Shoulder cup, hip crescent, little trench for the kettle if someone feels ambitious later. The ground says warm, not unkind, which is your favorite way it talks. A procession of city details wanders by and becomes part of your cartography. A woman passes with henna bright as sunset on her palms. A porter balances a wooden frame of flat breads that still remember the oven. 2 small goats argue with perfect manners. A colonnade hums with the soft business of scholars trading notes on the last caravan's news. You measure time by the shade's travel along the wall and by the rhythm of buckets at the well. Mainstream note hiding under your nap. Markets open early here to catch the cool. Caravan leaders schedule arrivals to dovetail with gate hours, prayer times, and the morning energy of scribes and sorters. There's a debate at the tea stall you decide to adopt as a lullaby. Historians still argue whether Timbuktu's gate levies and market fees in certain centuries were standardized by weight, by beast, or by the negotiating fluency of returning merchants, and how often exemptions were granted to trains carrying scholars' books. The tea sellers shrug and foam anyway. Some days rules are poetry, some days they are prose, and all days tea comes in 3 acts. Your eyelids settle exactly as the call to duha, those voluntary forenoon prayers, threads through the arcade, a melody that sounds like a window being opened. You don't fall into the deep siesta yet. The city's day has needs. But you slide into a civilized doze, the kind adults pretend they don't take, cheek near your scarf's edge, rope resting in your palm like a friendly weight. Your last thought before the micro-dream is that you have successfully carried sleep across absurd spaces and negotiated it with walls, bells, and keys as if it were the most tradable commodity in the world. When you wake, your ledger is balanced, arrival achieved, prayers woven in, kettles honored, final gate nap cashed. The wall wears its warm stripe, the Toron throws sensible shade, the scribe's ink dries to a perfect brown that makes your eyes happy. You stand, smooth the blanket, check the girba, and offer the nearest camel a look that says, "Thank you for being steady." The city goes on doing what cities do, making lists, making soup, making jokes, while you, having aimed at dawn and hit it, discover the real gift of timing. The day ahead can be as busy as it likes. You've already bought yourself calm. The breeze turns thoughtful, then bossy, then announces itself with a line of brown marching along the horizon like a curtain somebody decided to pull from the ground up. Nobody panics. The Emushag don't do panic. The plan is already old in their hands. You cinch the tallow-smoothed girth, check the X-ropes on the loads, and shorten the space between camels until the file becomes a quiet spine. A staff tap, 3 quick, 1 slow, means storm routine. Tie, lower, circle, breathe. You tuck your tagelmust higher over nose and cheeks, coal holding contrast at the edges, and feel your heart copy the guide's pace instead of the wind's. Storms here have personalities. Mainstream fact to set under your scarf. The Sahel's famous ha-boobs, walls of dust kicked up by thunderstorm outflows, can drop visibility from miles to meters, while Khamsin-like hot blows and harmattan dust veils work longer, drier mischief. Goat hair panels breathe in dry weather and tighten if rain arrives, which is why your shade can survive tantrums the sky throws. Today is a dry temper. The edge of daylight turns beige. Bells muffle as someone wraps a strip of cloth around the clappers so they speak in whispers. You make a low house out of patience. Saddlebags become anchors. The goat hair panel goes knee-high and tight. Hum note, not complaint. Guy lines disappear under buried sandbags, tamped flat the way you were taught on the white road. Camels kneel, nose to tail, in a loose windward sea, so their bodies become a living windbreak, and their tempers don't invent dramas. You run the rope loop once around your wrist and once around a saddle post, friendly but honest, so you won't take an accidental walk because the world forgot to include landmarks for an hour. Light joke number 1. Welcome to Open Plan Living, Beige Edition. Windows included. View optional. The guides shorten watches to catnap lengths. 10 minutes alert, 20 resting. Rotating like polite clock hands. Someone sprinkles a bare mouthful of water onto a cloth so you can breathe through damp rather than dust. Quirky tidbit the handlers swear by. A smear of oil, ghee or olive if anyone has it, just inside the nostrils makes a tiny dust trap that your nose thanks later. Whether that's chemistry or faith is between the oil and your sinuses, but you adopt it without argument. Miswak makes the round so mouths feel civilized. You think of the date pit coffee trick, the fennel star snack, the blue beads wink. Small comforts gathering like old friends at the door while the wind knocks on the walls. Detours sometimes announce themselves mid-storm. A gust collapses the hint of your planned contour. A new slip face builds where you were going to walk. Historians still argue whether caravans commonly pushed into manageable dust to avoid attention on exposed stretches, or whether best practice was always to sit, sip, and wait for the world to pick a direction again. Your crew chooses the older rule: low, patient, anchored. One guide lifts the staff, tap tap, then lets it rest. That means make sleep small and stack it. You lie on your side with the head slightly uphill in the shallow scrape you dug in 3 sweeps. Shoulder cup, hip crescent, little trench for the breeze to follow. The storm sounds like a book someone is turning too fast. Fabric talks, sand hisses. Something loose somewhere tries a new opinion and then is corrected with 2 fingers. You set your breaths to the goat hair's hum and turn your body into punctuation again. Comma, not period. Between bigger gusts, there's a pocket of hush, 3 heartbeats wide, and you spend it on a micro-doze. The rope's question mark warms under your fingers. A bell somewhere inside the circle sighs, a barely there yes. Light joke number 2. Your smartwatch calls this indoor cycling, which is adorable given that both indoor and cycling are strong words for what is essentially strategic napping in a portable sand museum. Visibility shrinks until the camp is the only sentence left. The Imushag do storm geometry the way bakers do dough. Fold, rest, fold. They keep the low edge of the panel toward the wind's chin and vent the top so gusts don't balloon your shade into a retired kite. You keep a hand on the girba. Evaporative loss is a thief when the air gets greedy. You trade in sips and steam instead of spectacle. Stern tea, just a mouthful. During the first lull, sociable tea if a second lull is polite, lullaby tea only when the world goes from shout to murmur. A date with fennel folded in pulls a tiny cathedral of calm over your tongue. The detour begins when the beige lifts enough to show a new ridge perched like a sleeping lion where there was a gentle shoulder this morning. The guides stand, read the horns on the barchans, and move the circle 2 camel lengths to test good violin sand with the brass spoon. Squeak and release. Yes, stakes will hold later. You walk the crest to read the slip face. You do not nap on the throat. Tamarisk combs tell you where the wind forgot to lie. Memory maps. Your palace of palms, pebbles, and verses light up as if dust itself were a librarian flicking on lamps. You relabel the route in your head. Not the left saddle, the second. Not the old leeward pocket, the new one that smells faintly of acacia resin. Mainstream reality hidden in the hush. Dunes migrate, meters per year in some corridors, and storms redraw edges faster. Old cairns get thin blankets, new crusts set like kiln-fired plates. That's why your nevers matter. Never in the wadi, even if it looks polite. Never on the windward nose unless you crave a free facial. Always 2 camel lengths from bushes that host ants with opinions. You check beetle highways. Present, avoid. You do the palm test. Warm, not unkind, accept. You smile because a rule book that fits in your hands is the only kind you can use when the horizon quits. When the storm's back finally breaks, the air drops an octave. The world returns in layers. First, the nearest strap on your saddle, then the camel's ear, then the outline of your goat hair roof, then the tamarisk fringe hassling the breeze. You stand with everyone else. Shake sand from the blanket with the same ceremony you used on the first night, and retune camp from bunker to porch. One last scan for any bell cloth that might choke a clapper. Bells need their voices for the detour. The guide taps out a new cadence with the staff. 2 short, 1 long, meaning contour, then crossing. Navigation becomes kinder when the storm has spent itself. The white road, firm, wind-polished crust, reappears like a hallway someone swept while you were asleep. You angle the file to borrow it, spacing bells to that sleepy cadence you adore. You drink exactly 1 mouthful. 2-second pour, no greed, and feel it landing like a vote for patience. Light joke number 3. You have successfully invented beige mode, battery saver for brains, where you think fewer thoughts and all of them have good posture. Detours cost time, so schedules flex. The leader trims watches to shorter shifts through the resculpted dunes, then lengthens them back when cadence returns. Prayers slide into their paired windows. Dur with Asr if needed, Maghrib with Isha later, because mercy is baked into the timetable. You count distances in songs again instead of in anxieties, grateful that the repertoire survived the wind. The camel under you resumes its agreeable glide, as if nothing happened, and also as if it had personally negotiated the weather's surrender. Historians still argue whether magnetic compasses ever had meaningful roles on these inland routes before the 19th century, or whether stars, wind, shrubs, and the long memory of guides remained the tools that actually moved salt and stories. You look up through clearing dust, find Al-Thuraya setting like a hand opening, and decide tonight your compass is made of 7 glittering arguments that all point to bed. Evening rinses the world blue. You stop where tamarisk draws a kind line and build the smallest possible house again. Knee-high windbreak, goat hair hum, shallow scrape, kettle trench just in case. Tea makes its 3 acts. Miswak resets the mouth. Dried lime performs its tart diplomacy. You place sandals under the mat edge. You tuck the girba where the shade will arrive an hour from now. You loop the rope and feel it relax like a cat deciding your lap is acceptable. The blue bead on the leader's bell, dusty and still game, catches one last stingy star and blinks like a hangnail of sky. Then you fold down, head uphill, eyes behind indigo, breath slow, counting not minutes but the distance between gusts, which is now long enough to be generous. The ground says warm, not unkind. Your body, which practiced sleeping in commas while the wind wrote run-on sentences, eases into something longer, less alert, more delicious. Tomorrow might bring more weather. Dunes will always edit themselves. Detours are the desert's housekeeping. But your kit is unchanged. Rope loop, goat hair note, good violin sand, tamarisk combs, fennel star snack, tea in 3, watches shortened kindly, naps stacked like soft bricks. You earned this soft landing, and it holds. You turn back toward the dunes with the city's warmth folded into your scarf. ink smell from a scribe's ledger, mint from 3 laughing glasses, a crumb of sweet bread you saved without meaning to. The walls exhale you at dawn. The gatekeeper's blue key charm winks once as if to stamp your passport in dust. Northbound, the file feels older and lighter in a way that isn't about weight. You know where the white road hides and how the bells talk. You know which dune is a gossip and which is a friend who simply prefers quiet. You step into that quiet and let it own the morning. The load has changed voices. Outbound, salt went south. Homeward, manuscripts wrapped in leather, neat bundles of cloth. Cola nuts that carry forest cheer into dry places, perhaps a small parcel of gum Arabic that smells like the idea of honey. Mainstream fact to tuck into your pocket. Timbuktu's golden centuries turned on such exchanges. Salt, northbound and southbound, yes, but also books, ink, and scholarship traveling with merchants. Centers like Sankore, Jingareber, and Sidi Yahia drew students from across the Sahel and Maghreb. You don't carry a library exactly, but the camel ahead bears a tight tube of rolled pages, and you treat your rope hand like it's holding a sentence you'd rather not drop. The first halt out of town is all small arithmetic. Retie the X ropes so the bundles don't sulk. Dab tallow at the buckle that was thinking about chafing. Check the girba. Count the knots on its strap. Then reward the whole performance with a short nap facing leeward while morning light is still courteous. Light joke number 1. You have become the kind of person who sets an alarm by bell spacing, which sounds strange until you realize bells are better at waking you with compliments than phones ever were. Your stories start migrating too. Someone retells the tea stall debate about gate fees, but trims it to the funniest lines. Someone else repeats a scribe's rumor about a caravan that arrived with 3 extra camels because 2 calves refused to stay home. Verified by no one and improved by everyone. A boy in the line hums a city melody and fits it to the road song cadence until the camels decide it was always meant that way. The Imushag approve with the tiniest nods. They like it when maps turn into music. Historians still argue whether the numbers reported by chroniclers for Timbuktu's students, 10,000, 20,000, reflect head counts, seasonal peaks, or generous civic pride. The only number that matters to you right now is the stanza length to the next nap. You refine your craft the way a baker refines a loaf he already knows. A new notch in the rope so the loop falls into your palm without hunting. A different fold to the scarf so the cat-eye slit frames less glare and more horizon. A habit of placing sandals under the mat in the same orientation every time so your feet never wake up confused. You standardize, warm, not unkind, with a 5 count if the wind is honest, and a 7 count if it has opinions. You lengthen the shallow scrape by a handspan, so your hip stops sending feedback. You shave the stopper of the girba a hair, so it says yes without drama. Quirky tidbit, gifted by an elder with henned fingertips. Stitch a single cowrie onto the corner of your blanket. It pays for small luck, she says. You laugh and do it anyway. Perhaps it buys you 1 elegant dream per week. Late afternoon, the breeze freshens like it wants to play percussion on your goat hair panel. You oblige. You place the panel low, taut until it sings the right note, and the shade becomes the kind that says, stay. You brew the stern glass shorter than usual, northbound restraint, and let the sociable one handle the mood. Fennel folded into a date turns into a ritual so ingrained you can do it with your eyes half closed. Light joke number 2. Your smartwatch now labels half your day culinary, which is accurate if you consider naps a form of cooking. Mirages keep auditioning new lakes. You politely pass. You're a professional now, and professionals know not to nap on shiny floors. Instead, you follow the tamarisk combs, the beetle highways. Place blanket away from those glossy runways. The yardang loaves, behind the second, not the first. All the grammar you memorized when the desert was still a language you didn't speak. A small memory palace lights up at each oasis. Miswak on the first palm, brass spoon on the second, fennel pouch on the third, goat hair roof humming on the fourth. And you feel the old naps you took there welcoming the new ones like hosts at a door. At a half-forgotten burr, the water is brackish but dignified. You tilt the girba high and let the pour pull a ribbon of air through tea. The bells rest with cloth wrapped around them. Storm etiquette you haven't shaken yet, and maybe that's fine. You post 2 light watches, habit more than necessity, and slide into a real sleep with the confidence of someone who has proof it will be there when they call for it. Mainstream truth under your cheekbone. In caravan life, the hottest hours were often reserved for true sleep. Not an indulgence, but a strategy that saved water, temper, and animal strength. So the night march could be civilized rather than heroic. You have become very fond of civilized rather than heroic. Another day, another debate that will probably survive us all. Historians still argue whether the famous Azalai salt trains from Taudeni marched on strict calendrical schedules or flexed more with politics and weather than later accounts admit. Your guides will tell you with a shrug and a grin. We left when the wind made sense and the camels agreed. You translate that into your own ledger. I slept when the shade was honest and the bells said yes. The nights northbound feel like rereading a beloved book. Orion's belt is right where you expect it. Blackboard ruler, good handwriting. Sirius is a sugar-bright dot that still bosses your pacing with minimal effort. The Pleiades, pinch of salt, handles the last leg before dawn. That blue cold that used to bully you but now just encourages a deeper wrap of scarf and a promise to nap after Fajr. You still use your fist and thumb astrolabe. You still hum the verse that puts the low saddle in your mouth before it arrives at your ankles. Light joke number 3. The desert has, effectively, turned you into a smartwatch. You'll be insufferable at dinner parties no one will attend because everyone is asleep on time. The white road shows up like a friend who remembers your favorite chair. You set the pace-setter camel to its best glide and ride the lull until the song calls for a sip. You catch a micro-doze between the second and third stanza on a crust so friendly you feel the earth rocking you, not resisting. You wake at the kettle's rehearsal. Someone's trying to boil water by thinking about it. And smile because there are still jokes to be made and verses to add, and you still have a bead to wink at the first star. By the time the salt town ghost rises on the horizon, Taghaza's pale loaves mortared with itself, a city that tastes like a story, you've turned homeward into a series of resting places you can draw with your feet. You know which trench edge to avoid, which wall throws shade that arrives on schedule, which miner calls halos bracelets for the wrist of the world. You load patience into the rope along with the new season's errands. You keep the bell's voice calm with a thumb of oil. You nap between clanks and clinks and the small, careful laughter of people who move heavy things kindly. And when, finally, the northern oasis you first learned to love reappears, dragonfly handwriting on the pond, palms writing shadows you can read like a familiar clock, You slip into that shade with a gratitude so quiet it feels like another form of sleep. You rinse your hands with the ladle that minds moderation. You brush your teeth with miswak that tastes like pepper and good habits. You place sandals under the mat edge and the girba where the shade will choose it later. You fold your scarf from march to nest, and you lie down the way only a seasoned traveler lies down, as if the ground was waiting for you, as if the breeze had saved a seat. This is the end of the going, and the beginning of the telling. You will carry the route back into rooms with walls that don't breathe, into nights with fans that hum like distant goats, into mugs that try to be stern and sociable and lullaby all at once. You will tell someone that you learned to count in bells, that shade has a geometry, that naps can be engineered with goat hair and good manners, that the sky can be a clock if you ask politely, that patience tastes like fennel in a date. And when they ask how you slept out there, in that wide, sand-written library, you'll smile and say, between Orion and a kettle, which will be true and also exactly enough. So now, while the last dunes smooth themselves into the distance and the bells grow small and kind, let everything you've been holding loosen, just a little, and then a little more. Let the rope become light in your hand, and then let it become memory, and then let it go. The goat hair roof is no longer a tent you must tune. It is simply a hush above you, and it hums in a key that suits the slow rhythm of your breath. The wind is not something to measure or manage. It is a soft visitor, and it moves through the tamarisk and over your cheek with the manners of a friend arriving late and whispering hello. The ground under you is warm, not unkind, and the shallow cradle you made for your shoulder folds you into its curve, as if it had been waiting for you to return. Shade travels at the pace you like now, unhurried and dependable. And if a single dragonfly writes a quiet word on the surface of a pond nearby, you can let that be the only sentence you read for a while. Stars will come when they're ready, and you don't need to count them. The sky remembers your fist and thumb, and will do the counting for you. There is tea somewhere in this picture, first strong, then kinder, then sweet, and you can choose to drink it, or simply hold the warm glass and feel your hands learn calm again. Your scarf can be loosened another notch. Your jaw can forget work. Your thoughts can line up, smallest to largest, and then step softly out of the room. Everything that mattered on the road, bells, shade, breath, now becomes a lullaby that asks nothing more than this. Allow rest to arrive on its own feet, and when it sits beside you, let it put one palm on your shoulder and the other over your eyes. Good. Stay. Sleep.